Imagine a quiet medieval town as night slowly settles over rooftops and narrow streets. The sun has dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky brushed with soft shades of violet, grey, and the faintest hint of gold fading from the day. Lanterns flicker in doorways and along winding alleys, their warm glow reflecting in puddles left by the day's rain. Smoke rises in gentle spirals from chimneys where clay hearths crackle and sputter, sending thin trails of warmth into the cool evening air. A few shutters creak as they are drawn closed, and the faint scent of baking bread or simmering stew drifts across the cobblestones. In the stillness, footsteps fall softly, muted against the stones, fading into the calm hush of night. Even the river at the edge of town seems slower now, carrying its waters in quiet murmurs that ripple beneath the last light of dusk. This is the world in which contests of strength and endurance sometimes unfolded, not in the roar of crowded arenas, but in the quiet preparation of those who trained, those who watched, and those who awaited their turn. The psychology of this was woven as much from patience and resilience as from physical prowess. Days were measured not only in combat, but in the gentle routines that preceded it. The shared meals at dawn, thick bread and watered Elliotton in companionable silence, the hours of stretching and measured practice in shadowed courtyards, the careful cleaning and oiling of leather straps and wooden training swords, and the whispered prayers that carried up fears and doubts alike into the night. In this slow, deliberate rhythm, one learned endurance, not only of body, but of mind. As we drift gently through these stories, we will not linger on the clash of steel or the spark of suit and confrontation. Instead, we will walk along the quieter margins of history, where life continued in measured steps. We will see the courtyards where fighters moved with calm concentration, the small tools of their craft laid carefully on benches, and the simple sandals waiting patiently at the edge of sanded arenas. We will notice how dawn spreads its light across the training fields, the soft weight of expectation pressing quietly on shoulders, and the careful gestures of practice repeated day after day. In these softer moments, we discover that the human heart is not always a battlefield. It is also a place of quiet resilience, hope, and slow steady endurance. Evening routines carried their own gentle significance. Smoke curling from chimneys, mingled with scent of fresh straw on damp earth, and children's laughter drifted from nearby homes. Soft and fleeting, townspeople moved like shadows between houses, delivering supplies, checking fences, and tending to the sound of distant bells, marking hours and prayers, blended with the soft clatter of shutters and the occasional bark of a dog, forming a meditative rhythm that held the night together. Within this atmosphere, the people who would step into contests of strength spent their time in preparation, in meditation, in every stretch of a limb. Every careful adjustment of armor or practice sword was part of an invisible thread connecting the ordinary and the extraordinary, the stillness and the struggle. There was also comfort to be found in repetition. Mornings followed predictable patterns, the rising sun, the sweeping of yards, the gathering of simple tools. The psychology of anticipation softened in these rhythms. There were no sudden shocks, here just the steady, grounding sense of familiarity that comes from knowing one's place, one's task, and one's companions. Quiet observation became a teacher, watching the birds hop along rooftops, noticing the curve of a roofline, listening to the soft drip of water from gutters. Each small detail, each careful repetition, trained the mind as much as the body, cultivating patience and focus in preparation for whatever the day might hold. As they moved through these hours, there was a subtle layering of emotion, gentle tension intertwined with the fighters' thoughts were not always of battle, but of endurance. Could they maintain calm in the heat of the sun? Could they steady their hands and feet, keep their breath slow, trust their bodies to perform as practiced? And yet there was comfort in routine, in the soft predictability of work, meals, prayer, and movement. In this gentle discipline, we glimpse a quiet psychology. The mind learns through repetition, through calm observance, through measured action. Strength is built not only from exertion, but from understanding one's own pace, one's own limits, and the small, steady victories of daily routine. So let us take a slow, deliberate walk through these streets together. Imagine the clatter of distant cartwheels softening as they pass, the smell of herbs drying in the sun, the soft coo of doves from a tower above. We will watch the sunlight spread across fields of grass and dirt, glinting on polished wood and leather. We will notice the glimmer of dew on cobblestones at dawn, and the faint shimmer of frost in winter mornings. Let us step into the world of ordinary people whose lives touched the edges of contests, where preparation mattered more than spectacle, where small acts of careened repetition shaped minds as much as bodies. And in doing so, we remember that history is not only found in dramatic battles or towering monuments, but in the quiet rhythm of everyday life. It is in the flicker of lantern light, in the warmth of hearths, in the steady passage of time measured in simple routines. It is in the soft murmur of prayers, the careful tying of sandals, the stretching of tired muscles, and the patient waiting of those who understood that life is carried forward not by sudden moments alone, but by the slow, steady beat of ordinary days. Now, lie back, breathe slowly, and let your imagination wander through these streets, through theatrining yards, through the courtyards, and along the paths of medieval towns. Listen to the distant bells, feel the soft weight of expectation, and sense the quiet heartbeat of life that sustained those who moved through the systems. In this calm reflection, we find resilience, patience, and the gentle wisdom of true psychology that lies not in spectacle, but in the human heart. At first light, the training yards of the medieval town were still and quiet. The sky was a soft grey, to shed faintly with the pale gold of dawn. Mist hung low over the grass, clinging to every blade, shimmering like tinner crystals in the gentle light. Wooden posts, worn smooth by countless strikes and practice sessions, stood upright across the yards. Each one bore small dents and scratches, subtle markers of the steady work of those way-trained here. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of wet earth, straw, and the wooden beams of nearby buildings. Somewhere, in the distance, a river murmured quietly, reflecting the soft awakening of the town. Footsteps were rare, almost hushed, as men and women moved through the spaces carefully, mindful of the stillness that lingered at this early hour. Men rose early, stretching slowly, moving with the stiffness of bodies trained hard but disciplined carefully over many days. The first motions were gentle arms lifted in measured sweeps, backs bending slowly to release tension, fingers and toes flexing to awaken muscles long rested. A few practiced in silence, their movements precise, breathing deep and even, a quiet rhythm echoing across the damp grass. Some lifted wooden swords in long, steady arcs, each motion repeated again and again, shaping muscularity as much as strength. Others used shields, pressing them against their shoulders or swinging them lightly, feeling their weight and balance. Every movement was deliberate, never rushed, teaching patience asthmac as readiness. Nearby, others sat quietly on low benches, cups of thin broth held carefully in their hands. They sipped slowly, feeling warmth spread through their bodies, calming nerves, and preparing for the day. Even in these early hours, the psychology of preparation was present. Every sip, every breath, every stretch reminded them that endurance was not simply a measure of strength, but of the mind. Patience and focus were cultivated here quietly, woven into each routine, repeated until it became as natural as breathing. There was no need for hasty nature. Light and rhythm guided the pace of the morning. The yards themselves carried memory. There weren't dirt paths where men had walked for years were smooth in some places and rutted in others, evidence of countless footsteps. Small clumps of grass pushed through the soil here and there, resilient and soft underfoot. Wooden beams leaned against walls, polished by use, while straw mats lay rolled neatly along fences, waiting to cushion a fall or support stretching exercises. The air smelled faintly of oak and pine from the posts, mixed with sweetness of hay and the faint tang of iron from tools. Even the birds seemed to move slowly, wings brushing through the cool air, calling softly to one another as they began their day. The quiet of the morning was filled with small, human details. A kettle clinked softly from a nearby window, a simple sound marking breakfast being prepared. A dog padded lazily through the yards, sniffing at a discarded piece of straw. Somewhere, the rhythmic tapping of a wooden sword on a post echoed faintly, a slow percussion that seemed to synchronize with breathing and the heartbeat of those training. Everything moved gently, in harmony. The town itself seemed to tone gradually, in a measured way, each sound layering upon the next without startling the calm of simmering. Emotions ran subtle but deep. There was focus, quiet determination, and a hint of nervous anticipation for the day ahead. Some wrestled with soft whispers in the mind reminding them of past mistakes or missteps. But these too were softened by repetition and ritual. The regularity of practice, the familiar weight of tools, and the comforting presence of companions created a rhythm that eased worry and tension. Training became meditation. Every motion, every footfall, every swing of wood against wood shaped not just the body, but the mind, teaching calm under pressure, patience in practice, and the enduring power of steady effort. Thick yard walls framed the scene with warm, muted colors. Mud brick glowed faintly in the morning light, casting long shadows across the ground. Ivy and climbing plants reached gently toward the sun, brushing along the edges of beams and windows. A soft breeze carried the sense of distant gardens and fresh herbs, swirling around the participants in practice. These details, small and often overlooked, mattered. They offered comfort and a sense of place, grounding the fighters in the world around them even as they focused inward, shaping both mind and muscle. Time moved slowly here, measured not by hours on a clock, but by the sun rising higher in the sky and the shifting of shadows across the yards. Moments of pause were just as important as moments of action. Hands rested on knees, backs leaned against cool wood, and eyes followed the arcs of swords or the rise and fall of companions' breathing. There was a subtle rhythm in all this, a quiet pulse that connected body, mind, and environment. The psychology of early mornings taught lessons in observation, in learning from one's surroundings, and in finding calm even in anticipation. Meals prepared before the sun climbed fully were simple but nourishing. Bowls of porridge, bread slightly toasted over coals, and thin broths provided energy. Hands, that were soon to wield wood and shield, were first guided through the gentle motions of eating and drinking. The act of self was deliberate, a small ritual in the day's larger rhythm. Eating became meditation, a soft reminder that the body and mind were inseparable, each needing care to endure the hours of quiet discipline. As the morning stretched, shadows receded slowly across the ground. The dew evaporated from the grass, leaving it soft and cool underfoot. Wooden posts gleamed faintly with moisture, smooth from the touch of hands over countless repetitions. Men and women continued their exercises, alternating between swinging, lifting, and controlled movements. Breaths were synchronized with each motion, steps measured with care, and the small sounds of practice wood tapping. Feet shifting, soft exhalations blended into a lullaby of endurance. It was a quiet ballet, a dance of focus and patience, repeating, teaching, and grounding all at once. By mid-morning, the sun had climbed enough to cast a warm, golden light across the yards. The mist had lifted, revealing the textures of wood and straw in greater detail. Shadows fell long but softened against the mud brick walls. The liquid had transformed into gentle activity, still slow and measured, yet carrying a sense of life awakening fully. Men paused periodically, wiping sweat from brows, stretching back with careful thought, or adjusting grips on wooden swords. Even in stillness, there was movement, a continual interplay between effort and rest, teaching endurance and quiet reflection simultaneously. And as the day continued, the lessons of morning lingered. Each repetition, each step, each careful swing, shaped not just the body, but the mind. Calm focus became mastery. Quiet observation became instinct. The yards were not only a place of training, but a sanctuary where the rhythm of patience, discipline, and gentle effort was learned, moment by moment. These early hours, soft and deliberate, carried a subtle power, the power of shaping thought, of cultivating endurance, and of walking through life with awareness and quiet strength. Here, in the soft light of dawn, the psychology of preparation was revealed, not in grand gestures, but in the quiet unfolding of the day. Patience, mindfulness, and steady practice were as vital as any sword or shield. And as the town continued to awaken, the morning in the training yards remained a testament to the gentle endurance of human effort, the slow rhythm of learning, and the serene beauty of a day begun with calm, focused intention. Morning light streamed softly through narrow windows, casting golden stripes across stone floors and wooden benches. In the training yards, the clatter of swords and shields was briefly paused, and a gentle murmur of preparation drifted toward the hall where meals awaited. These early meals were plain but carefully prepared, serving a purpose beyond mere taste. Thick slices of coarse bread lay on wooden platters, small portions of cheese stacked neatly beside them, and bowls of stewed grains emitted a faint, comforting steam that mingled with the aroma of herbs drying nearby. Each item, humble and modest, carried the quiet rhythm of nourishment destined to sustain, to strengthen, and to teach endurance through repetition and simplicity. Men and women moved slowly through the hall, carrying their bowls and cups with measured care. The air was filled with faint clinks of wooden utensils against bowls, the soft rustle of tunics, and the occasional sigh of contentment as a warm morsel met lips. A jug of watered wine or ale was passed quietly, shared without ceremony, a simple gesture of companionship that underscored the gentle rhythm of life. Conversation was sparse, soft, almost reverent in its restraint. No one boasted loudly or spoke above a gentle murmur. Instead, there was an awareness that every bite, every swallow, was a step toward endurance, a reminder that strength came not only from practice in the yard, but also from mindful attention to the body's needs. The texture of food was familiar, and grounding bread was dense and coarse, offering a chewiness that slowed each bite, demanding care and focus. Cheese was slightly tangy, yet mild, lending small bursts of flavor that punctuated the simple taste of grain. The stew, thick and hearty, carried subtle hints of root vegetables and herbs, warming the stomach and easing the muscles after early exercises. Eating became an almost meditative act, a time to center oneself before the digestions. Each portion was measured, deliberately modest, ensuring that no one overate and dulled the body. In this gentle regulation, the psychology of nourishment revealed itself. Moderation as a path to endurance, awareness as a path to balance. Tables were arranged with quiet efficiency. Wooden benches ran parallel, 2 long rough-hewn tables, and small bowls and cups were placed with care at each spot. Crumbs fell occasionally, pressed underfoot by boots or sandals. Yet even these small imperfections went unnoticed, absorbed into the natural rhythm of the morning. A dog padded quietly along the edges of the room, sniffing at the occasional scrap, adding a subtle warmth to the routine without disrupting the calm order. Birds might tap atop in windows, seeking grains left behind, their soft chirps blending with the quiet murmur of conversation. Everything in the room existed in a balance of purpose and peace, the act of eating itself a practice of mindfulness and self-care. Those who sat to eat understood more than hunger. They understood rhythm. The timing of meals was precise, aligned with the slow arc of the sun, the natural pace of training, and the quiet spaces between labor and rest. Even the act of passing a jug required attention, a soft nod, a careful tilt of thirst, ensuring that the liquid flowed steadily without spilling. In these small motions, participants learn out patience and precision, values that carried into every aspect of daily life. The morning meal was not hurried. It existed as a pause, a moment to anchor the mind, to nurture the body, and to remember the subtle power of fruit body. Sometimes, small gestures punctuated the quiet rhythm. A hand reached across the table to steady a cup, fingers brushing gently against another's. A piece of bread was offered without words, accepted with a soft glance. These moments, fleeting and understated, reinforced a gentle camaraderie among those who trained together. Eating was not simply sit-ins, it was shared presence, a communal meditation on the necessities of life. The psychology of companionship, intertwined with nourishment, became part of the larger pattern of endurance, a lesson that strength was cultivated not only in isolation, but within the steady, supportive presence of others. The hall itself carried subtle textures that soothed the senses. Wooden beams overhead were darkened with age, polished faintly by the touch of hands over years of maintenance. Sunlight filtered through small leaded windows, casting soft patterns across the floor. The scent of herbs hung faintly, mingling with the warmth of bread and the earthy smell of grain. Even the coolness of stone walls added a tactile layer to the experience, grounding those seated in the present moment. Each detail, subtle yet persistent, contributed to a calm atmosphere where nourishment could be absorbed both physically and psychologically. Even the silence between words was meaningful. The occasional cough or scrape of a chair did not disrupt the peace. It punctuated it gently, marking the steady passage of time. Eating in this way encouraged awareness not of what might come next, but of the immediate experience, the warmth of broth, the firmness of bread, the gentle texture of cheese. Every bite, every swallow, was a lesson in patience, a practice in mindfulness, a way of grounding oneself before the body would be asked to move and endure further in the training yards. Meals also reflected preparation for the day's physical demands. Portion sizes were modest, yet sufficient. Every mouthful was calculated to provide energy without heaviness, to sustain the body without diminishing alertness. Water was sipped regularly, never in excess, and even the act of chewing became a rhythm that mirrored the movements of training, deliberate, measured, and attentive. In this way, food became more than sustenance. It became a tool for teaching self-awareness and reinforcing the subtle psychology of preparation that underpinned all aspects of daily life. Beyond the act of eating, there were gentle rhythms of movement. Hands cleaned bowls, swept crumbs into small piles, and carried dishes to a nearby bench for washing. Water was poured carefully into basins, cloths dipped and wrung with soft precision. Even the smallest tasks were performed with attention, creating a continuity of action that mirrored the steady repetition of training. The psychology of routine manifested here, as each action reinforced discipline, patience, and quiet focus. Nothing was rushed. Every gesture existed as part of a larger rhythm, a choreography of care and mindfulness that extended the principles of endurance from the training yard to the dining hall. Occasionally, laughter punctuated the quiet, not loud or boisterous, but soft, restrained chuckles that rose and fell like gentle waves. A shared joke, a memory of a menormaship, or the subtle absurdity of early morning clumsiness brought lightness to the ritual. These small moments reminded participants of the human heart beneath discipline, grounding psychological endurance in shared humanity. Even in the midst of preparation for trials and challenges, there was room for softness, humor, and simple joy. As the meal concluded, attention slowly shifted from the table back to the yards. The bread and cheese, the bowls of grains, and the sips of watered wine had done more than nourish the body. They had prepared the mind, shaped patience, and reinforced rhythm. Hands wiped slowly on cloths, bowls were stacked with care, and the quiet satisfaction of fullness settled like a soft weight over each individual. There was no rush to depart. The calm lingered, extending the gentle lesson that endurance was not only physical, but deeply psychological, rooted in preparation, mindfulness, and care. Finally, the participants rose, gathering their cups and bowls, stepping softly onto the dew-kissed earth. The transition from hall to yard was smooth, a continuation of the morning's rhythm. Each footfall, each exhale, each stretch reflected the subtle training of mind, as well as meals of endurance were more than food. They were the quiet cultivation of habit, the nurturing of calm awareness, and the gentle reinforcement of the steady, patient approach to life that carried through every challenge, every exercise, and every quiet morning. In the simplicity of bread, cheese, and stewed grains, in the soft passing of jugs and careful placement of utensils, there lay a profound lesson. Strength grew not only from exertion, but from the mindful care of one's body, the shared presence of companions, and the gentle, deliberate turns of daily life. In these small, unassuming acts, the psychology of endurance was quietly taught, embedding itself in rhythm, observation, and attention. And as the sun climbed higher, bathing the yards and halls in warm light, the morning meal ended, not with fanfare, but with the soft satisfaction of purpose fulfilled, a foundation laid for the day's continuing practice. The morning air carried a soft chill as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the wooden beams of the training yard. Here, the tools of practice rested quietly, awaiting the hands that would guide them through another day. Of repetition and focus, wooden swords lay in neat rows on benches, their surfaces worn smooth by years of touch, small dents and scratches tracing the memory of countless swings. Shields, round and sturdy, leaned against posts, patched carefully with strips of leather and rope, each repair a testament to attention, care, and the quiet rhythm of daily life. Sandbags filled with earth rested in corners, slightly compressed, from the weight of previous practice, exhaling faint scents of damp straw and soil. These objects, simple as they were, formed an aqueous world in which the psychology of endurance unfolded, teaching patience and mindfulness as much as skill. Men and women moved among these tools with deliberate care. Fingers traced the worn edges of wooden swords, feeling the subtle ridges carved by repeated grips and swings. Hands smoothed over the leather off-shields, pressing down the patches, testing the flexibility of the straps, and adjusting the weight just so. There was a quiet conversation between body and tool, a rhythm that could only be learned through repeated touch and attention. Each object, though humble, became an extension of the self, translating thought into movement, patience into skill. The psychological bond between practitioner and instrument was subtle but profound. It allowed focus to deepen, posture to settle, and breath to find a calm, steady cadence. Sandbags provided anotherlia of tactile learning. They were simple in form, yet versatile in use. Some were swung with two hands, others pressed or lifted, absorbing impact with every movement. The earthy smell of soil and straw became familiar, comforting even, a sensory reminder that practice was both grounding and sustaining. Fighters learned to gazette the weight of each bag, to sense its shifting center of gravity, to anticipate its response to force. In this quiet attention, there was no rush, no pressure, only the soft accumulation of experience that would shape their endurance, their strength, and their calm presence. The tools themselves carried stories. Wooden swords bore faint carvings, initials or small symbols etched by careful hands, marking progress or perhaps the passing of a particularly memorable day. The leather on shields had softened in many places, polished by sweat and repeated handling, and frayed ropes reminded the user of long hours spent perfecting movements. Each nick, each fray, each subtle imperfection was a lesson in resilience. Rather than distracting from practice, these small floss-beckham teachers demonstrating that progress is rarely instantaneous, that mastery is a slow accrual of effort, repetition, and attentive care. Even the air around the tools held quiet significance. Early morning dew clung tough grass near wooden posts, a faint chill rising from the soil as the sun climbed higher. Birds hopped along fences, their delicate chirps merging with the gentle scuffing of feet against dirt and straw. The occasional scrape off a sword across would punctuate the soft murmurs of movement. Each sound, subtle and deliberate, became part of the rhythm of the yard, reinforcing the psychology of focused practice. Awareness of these small details encouraged calm, grounding attention in the present moment rather than anticipation or distraction. Fighters approached the tools with a mindfulness that resembled meditation. Hands adjusted grips, elbows flexed slowly and wrists rotated gently. Movements were repeated, sometimes in sets, sometimes as free practice, each body's memory and the mind's concentration. There was no urgency, only patience. The psychology of repetition was embedded in these motions. The mind learned to tolerate effort without strain, to anticipate patterns without tension, and to trust the body to respond in kind. In every swing, every press, every lift, endurance was quietly nurtured, linking thought, breath, and movement into a cohesive rhythm. The humble wooden swords were particularly instructive. Smooth to the touch, yet rigid in structure, they required careful attention to wield effectively. Grip strength, wrist alignment, shoulder engagement all were honed slowly through daily repetition. A single sword, marked with scratches from previous practice, became a repository of memory. Each dent a subtle echo of an earlier lesson. Each smooth patch a confirmation of repeated care. Fighters learned to observe, to anticipate, to correct without judgment. The psychology of trust was central. They learned to trust the tool, to trust themselves, and to trust the slow accumulation of skill over days, weeks, and years. Shields offered a complementary lesson. Their weight demanded awareness of balance and posture. Their curvature required precise placement, and their leather covering offered tactile feedback with every movement. Fighters learned to sense subtle shifts, to respond calmly to resistance, and to integrate these experiences into the wider flow of practice. Repairing a shield, a strap, patching leather, mending frayed rope was not a chore, but a meditative exercise, reinforcing patience and mindfulness. Every mark, every repair carried the quiet story of labor and learning, forming an ongoing dialogue between the practitioner and their instrument. Sandbags, simple though they were, introduced variability and challenge into the morning's routine. Some were heavy, requiring deliberate lifting, while others swung unpredictably under the force of motion. Fighters learned to observe, adapt, and remain calm, understanding that each variation taught awareness, control, and measured respect. Subtle psychology embedded in these practices was profound. By engaging with objects in a gentle, attentive way, the mind developed resilience, the capacity for focus, and an appreciation for the slow, cumulative nature of skill. Even small accessories, ropes, weights, and wooden pegs played roles in the quiet education of endurance. Ropes might be used to mark distances, strengthen grip, or create subtle resistance. Wooden pegs were positioned carefully for footwork, exercises, or balance drills. Each element required attention, repetition, and patience. Over time, the repetition became second nature, embedding itself in muscle memory and mental focus alike. The mind, trained in calm observation, learned to find rhythm in routine, to look at comfort in the familiar, and to embrace subtle progress over sudden triumph. The psychological effect of these tools extended beyond the physical. Using them, fighters cultivated resilience, patience, and a sense of steady self-control. In the repetitive, mindful interaction with objects, they learned to calm anticipatory anxiety, regulate breath, and focus attention. Each small movement, whether lifting, striking, adjusting, or repairing, was a meditation, reinforcing a subtle understanding of endurance. The quiet hum of concentration in the yard, the soft echoes of practice across wood and straw, and the tactile feedback from tools, all combined to teach a kind of psychological fortitude that was gentle, persistent, and enduring. As the morning progressed, sunlight gradually warmed the yard. Dew evaporated, grass softened underfoot, and the shadows of posts lengthened and shifted. Fighters continued their measured routines, alternating between exercises, adjusting grips, and observing others. There was a quiet rhythm in this flow, a gentle pulse that united body, tool, and mind. Awareness of detail, how a sword felt, how a shield moved, how a sandbag shifted, taught a patient attentiveness that extended into every aspect of daily life. Psychology and physicality were inseparable here. Endurance was cultivated through a subtle dance of observation, repetition, and care. By midday, the tools had been engaged, adjusted, and wooden swords bore the warmth of hands. Shields reflected the careful attention of repeated lifts, and sandbags had absorbed the subtle pressure of countless movements. Every mark, every dent, every fray was a gentle reminder of effort, growth, and patient accumulation. These objects were more than implements. They were partners in a quiet ritual of endurance, their subtle language teaching the rhythm of repetition, the patience of attention, and the calm focus necessary for resilience in both body and mind. In the calm of the training yard, the tools of practice told their stories silently. Wooden swords, round shields, sandbags, ropes, and pegs each held memory, wisdom, and quiet guidance. Their psychology was subtle. They instructed patience, focus, mindfulness, and endurance without words. Each interaction reinforced slow learning, attentive observation, and measured effort, and as fighters moved among them, they carried these lessons into every swing, step, and breath, weaving the quiet wisdom of practice into the fabric of daily life. By the time the sun had climbed high into the sky, warming the walls and casting long shadows across the yard, the rhythm of practice had settled into a gentle cadence. Every motion was calm and deliberate, every object respected and observed, every mind focused and steady. Here, the psychology of quiet practice was fully realized, a slow, immersive, patient engagement with the tools of life, teaching that endurance, skill, and attention are cultivated not through sudden triumph, but through steady, thoughtful repetition. In the quiet hours before midday, the courtyards of the training grounds seemed almost suspended in time. Sunlight filtered gently through the open archways, touching the worn stone floors with soft, golden streaks. Thea carried the faint scent of warm earth, mingled with the subtle aroma of herbs drying along the edges of Veyard. Wooden benches lined the walls, and low stools were scattered thoughtfully near patches of grass where the sun caught the tips of each blade. Dust rose lazily from the pathways when a foot disturbed it, and in the stillness it drifted slowly back to the ground, catching the light as it fell. In these spaces, waiting was not mere, it was a slow, deliberate art, a practice in mindfulness and patience that shaped the inner life as much as the routines of physical training shaped the body. Men and women occupied the courtyards in small clusters or alone, each finding a rhythm that suited the quiet pace of the morning. Some sat on low benches, their hands busy with sharpening tools, wooden swords, leather straps, small iron blades, listening to the faint scraping sound, echoing softly across the walls. Others leaned against the sun-warmed stone, eyes half closed, watching the delicate swirl of dust in shafts of light, or the gentle sway of leaves in the breeze. Every movement wasn't hurried, and the ordinary sounds of life became the markers of time. The soft scrape of a stool as some wind shifted position, the distant tolling of a bell, the faint rustle of a bird settling in a nearby tree. Each noise, those present that the passage of hours could be observed calmly, without the urgency of the outside world pressing upon them. Waiting, in this way, was its own kind of training. The psychology of passion revealed itself in small, almost imperceptible ways. A man sharpening a wooden sword might notice a slight change in the texture of the wood beneath his fingers. A woman seated nearby could trace the flight of a bird across the courtyard, and both would find in these moments a quiet satisfaction. Awareness of detail, careful observation, and a steady rhythm of breathing became intertwined with the very act of existing in the courtyard. The mind learned to occupy itself gently, without agitation, even when the day's work or not yet begun. Children sometimes appeared at the edges of the courtyards, feet soft on stone, their laughter low and flitting. They were often drawn to the simple fascination of sunlight on dust, or the glint of a polished blade. Their presence reminded the adults that life moved in cycles, that waiting was shared across generations, and that quiet attentiveness could coexist with joy. Occasionally, a child's curiosity led to the subtle rearrangement of a tool or a cautious touch of a shield, each interaction observed calmly by those sitting nearby. In this, patience was practiced not as a forced discipline but as a gentle understanding that all things unfold in time. The bench's stemels carried the memory of countless hours spent in stillness. Hands had pressed against the wood for comfort or balance, leaving faint traces of wear. Stone floors bore the impressions of repeated footsteps, subtle hollows where knees had rested or where bodies had shifted position. Even the sun-warmed patches of grass seemed to hold the memory of those who had paused there, softening under repeated contact. Each element of the courtyard woodstone and earth offered a quiet tactile connection to time itself. A reminder thought endurance was cultivated in small, deliberate increments. Prayers and murmurs occasionally threaded through stillness. Some sat quietly, eyes lowered, offering soft words of gratitude or seeking calm before the day's. Others whispered reflections to themselves, gentle mantras of focus and reassurance. The courtyard became a sanctuary where the inner life was attended to as carefully as the physical form. Breath became a quiet metronome, measuring the rhythm of waiting, and awareness of body and mind deepened. Even when the mind wandered, the soft, repeated motions of the courtyard footsteps, shifting benches, the brushing of hands, across-worn wood brought attention gently back to the present. Time in the courtyard was measured not by the movement of the sun alone, but by subtle, everyday markers. The shift in the quality of light across a wall, the gentle sway of a vine climbing toward the roof, or the distant coo of a pigeon became indicators of past. These small, repeated observations helped the mind to settle, teaching that awareness itself is a form of preparation. One learned to observe, to notice, to dwell calmly in the present moment. Waiting was, in essence, a slow exercise in emotional regulation, an internal rehearsal for the patience and endurance demanded in other aspects of life. Even minor routines added structure to the quiet. Some individuals organized tools along the edges of the courtyard, aligning wooden swords and shields with careful precision. Others tended small herb gardens or swept pathways, their motions slow, methodical, and rhythmic. Each action, though seemingly mundane, carried the weight of intentionality. Repetition became a form of meditation, and the courtyard transformed into a living classroom where psychology and routine intertwined. The simple acts of touching, arranging, or observing became subtle exercises in discipline, focus, and mental resilience. Conversations were minimal, soft, and deliberate. A whispered question, a quiet answer, or the muted laughter at a shared observation punctuated the silence without breaking it. These gentle interactions reinforced social bonds while maintaining a calm atmosphere. There was no need for loudness or urgency. The flow of words mirrored the rhythm of the courtyard itself. One learned that connection and attentiveness could coexist with patience, and that enduring presence was nurtured as much through quiet observation as through direct action. Birds, insects, and other small elements of nature added another layer to the courtyard's subtle education. The flutter of wings, the distant buzz of a bee, the gentle swaying of branches in a morning breeze, each became part of the tapestry of attention. Observing these details encouraged a mindfulness that complemented the physical and psychological practices of the fighters. The environment, in all its quiet richness, was both teacher and companion, guiding attention, fostering calm, and reinforcing the slow, measured rhythm of waiting. In Thekachards, nothing was hurried. Each person settled into a personal rhythm, shifting weight from foot to foot, adjusting a grip on a wooden sword, or smoothing a folded blanket of straw beneath them. The psychology of waiting was subtle: to be present without tension, to accept the slowness of the hour, to find comfort in the ordinary flow of life. Every pause was an opportunity for reflection, for observation, and for the cultivation of patience. Even the small discomforts, the chill in the morning air, the rough texture of a bench, became instruments of awareness, teaching adaptability and resilience. The lessons of stillness extended into the perception of time. Distant bells tolled, occasionally, not as commands, but as markers, gentle reminders. Oft, shadows moved across the courtyard, elongating and shrinking in a slow dance dictated by the sun. The soft rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of water provided a steady, continuous soundtrack to Themerin. These sensory details reinforced the understanding that life's moments are often measured not in action, but in attention, observation, and the quiet acknowledgement of passing time. Even tasks as simple as standing tools or sweeping pathways became intertwined with psychological growth. Wooden swords wary excellent for wear, sandbags adjusted to balance, and ropes smoothed along the ground. Each act reinforced focus, awareness, and the delicate management of energy. The courtyard, in this way, became an instrument of learning, a space where the mind could practice calm, the body could rest while remaining engaged, and patience could be strengthened without pressure or urgency. Small social rituals punctuated the day: passing a cup of water, offering a nod of acknowledgement, or softly guiding a younger participant through a simple adjustment, became subtle exercises in empathy, attentiveness, and interpersonal awareness. These gentle interactions reinforced the communal nature of endurance, highlighting that waiting was not only an individual practice, but a shared rhythm that cultivated trust, cooperation, and calm within the group. As the morning wore on, the light shifted, and shadows stretched across the stone floors. The courtyards, once quiet, were now infused with a gentle hum of motion, shifting bodies, careful footsteps, the faint clink of metal against wood, and soft, murmurs of conversation. Time continued its slow, deliberate progression. The psychological training embedded in these hours of waiting became increasingly evident. The ability to remain composed, attentive, and present, even when action was not required, was as vital as any skill developed in the training yard. By late morning, the courtyard had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Tools lay organized, dust drifted lazily in the sunlight, and those present moved with a calm, practiced grace. The art of waiting had transformed the space into a sanctuary of mindfulness, observation, and subtle self-discipline. Here, the psychology of endurance was quietly reinforced, teaching that patience, awareness, and gentle attention to routine were essential qualities for life, both inside and outside the training yards. In the courtyards of waiting, life flowed at its own pace, neither hurried nor idle. Every sound, motion, and pause contributed to a larger understanding of self and environment. The long hours spent in quiet observation and subtle activity shaped the mind, building resilience.com, and a steady presence would carry through the day's labor, training, and beyond. Waiting was not a void. It was a lesson in continuity, mindfulness, and the patient cultivation of inner strength. Morning light filtered softly across the courtyard, touching the rough stone floors and sun-warmed benches with pale gold. In this gentle glow, the simple garments of those who trained and waited were revealed in detail. Coarse tunics hung naturally from shoulders, belted at the waist with strips of leather or rope. Their fabric rotted a touch but carefully maintained. Each tunic carried the subtle imprint of repeated wear, small frays at themes, faint discolorations where the sun had kissed the fabric, and occasional patches where careful hands had mended the cloth. These garments were not meant to impress, nor to display wealth or status. They were instruments of endurance, quietly serving the body as it moved through hours of practice, waiting, and observation. Sandals of braided leather or rope were the faithful companions of each step. Their straps, softened by long use, molded gently to the shape of the foot. The soles bore faint impressions of countless walks across it, stone and grass, subtly worn in patterns unique to each wearer. Leather that had cracked with age was carefully oiled and softened. Braided ties were replaced when frayed, and knots retied to ensure that every step was secure, yet unburdened. The psychology of such footwear was simple, yet profound. Each pair reminded the wearer of their path, the slow accumulation of movement and effort, and the gentle lessons of patience seemed in every stride. Cloaks draped across shoulders during chill mornings carried both comfort and practicality. Thick woolen fabric rustled softly with movement, offering a protective layer against wind or sudden showers. Some cloaks bore the faint aroma of smoke from hearths, mingled with the earthy scent of soil and straw from the courtyard. They were patched where wear had opened tiny holes, and their edges were rolled and secured with small leather ties, forming quiet symbols of care and attention. In these cloaks, one could feel warmth and resilience, subtle reminders that endurance was cultivated not only through physical effort, but through preparation and mindful maintenance of one's environment. The act of dressing each day was itself a psychological practice, pulling a tunic over the head, adjusting a belt, sliding the foot into a sandal, draping a cloak over the shoulders. Each motion was deliberate, careful, and reflective. There was a rhythm to this preparation, a gentle sequence that signaled readiness, not for display but for steady, measured engagement with day. The mind learned to associate these garments with a calm attentiveness, an internal cue to settle into routine, focus, and endurance. Each layer of clothing carried the quiet authority of habit, shaping posture, presence, and patience even before any physical exertion began. Leather straps that crossed shoulders or were tied around the torso reinforced both physical and psychological strength. They secured small pouches, held tunics in place, or carried the occasional tool for practice. Hands adjusted these straps carefully, ensuring neither looseness nor excessive tightness, balancing comfort with support. The tactile sensation of leather against skin was grounding, reminding the wearer of limits and capacity. Through repeated attention to such details, the mind became attuned to subtle feedback, the way straps shifted with movement, how tension affected breathing, and how comfort allowed focus to remain steady. The psychology of these small adjustments was profound. Through care and repetition, quiet resilience became habitual. Garments reflected an understated hierarchy of care, and tunics and cloaks, mended with skill and precision, demonstrated experience and attention, while newer fabric reminded of freshness and learning. Yet no attire conferred status in any pronounced way. Instead, uniformity and practicality reinforced a communal understanding. Endurance, focus, and steady effort were valued above appearance. The psychology of humility was woven through each thread, reminding those trained that strength is measured not in show or ornament, but in patience, consistency, and mindful engagement with daily life. Morning chores often intertwined with preparation. Tunics were brushed free of dust, sandals wiped clean of dirt, and cloaks adjusted against the occasional gust of wind. Each task was performed slowly, deliberately, and without rush. Fingers traced, fraying edges, replaced knots, and smoothed folds, each gesture enforcing calm attentiveness. Through these motions, attention was trained to notice small details, recognize imperfections without frustration, and cultivate acceptance of limitations. The mind, much like the garment's thumbs fuse, was gently conditioned to expect continuity, consistency, and quiet care as foundational elements as fighters moved through their morning routines. The garments responded with gentle familiarity. Sandals flexed with each step. Tunics shifted over the body with ease, and cloaks draped naturally across householders. The tactile feedback of cloth and leather offered reassurance, reinforcing the psychological endurance that preparation and attention to detail provide stability and calm. Each adjustment of fabric or strap became a form of meditation, a subtle rehearsal of patience and measured effort. The mind learned that small acts of care translate into comfort, readiness, and resilience over time. Even the maintenance of these garments was embedded in routine. Worn leather was cleaned and softened with oils derived from plants. Threads frayed at the seams were carefully reinforced, and coarse fabric was patched with spare cloth from previous mending. The act of repair itself was instructive, a quiet meditation on impermanence, continuity, and responsibility. The mind cultivated an appreciation for durability over appearance, function over decoration, and subtle persistence over immediate results. In the repetition of mending, folding, and adjusting, the wearer internalized lessons of patience, attentiveness, and mindful care that carried into both physical practice and daily life. Cloaks offered additional psychological reassurance. Draped around shoulders during brief pauses, they provided warmth and security, creating a gentle boundary between the self and the external environment. The mind recognized this layer of protection, finding calm in the consistency and predictability of its presence. The physical comfort of clothing became inseparable from the mental state it encouraged. Awareness of bodily boundaries, attention to tactile feedback, and steady engagement with the rhythm of daily life. Over time, the simple presence of well-maintained garments fostered subtle confidence and preparedness, even in the absence of immediate activity. Sandals, being in closest contact with the ground, carried particularly strong lessons. This absorbed uneven terrain, teaching balance and sensitivity. Braided straps encouraged careful movement, reminding the wearer to pace themselves and attend to subtle shifts in posture. The repetitive motion of adjusting and tying sandals each day reinforced patience and deliberate action. Over months and years, this small ritual became ingrained, linking tactile care with the psychological cultivation of endurance. Walking, standing, and preparing for the day became exercises in mindfulness, attention, and steady focus. The color and texture of garments also played a role in subtle mental cues. Earthy tones of brown, gray, and muted greens harmonized with the environment, encouraging unobtrusiveness and simplicity. Coarse textures reminded the wearer of durability and humility. Soft patches from repairs contrasted with rough original fabric, signaling continuity, and each garment, in its simplicity and practicality, communicated the values of steadiness, attentiveness, and quiet resilience. These visual and tactile cues reinforced psychological calm, helping the mind to settle into rhythm, awareness, and acceptance of the ordinary flow of life. Even the smallest items, belts, ties, and leather straps, became instruments of discipline. Adjusting the tightness of a belt, aligning a strap, or retying a knot. A repetitive, meditative engagement with daily preparation. These small rituals required no words, no instruction, yet imparted a subtle sense of control, readiness, and mindfulness. The mind learned through thibity and the tools it wore to measure effort, attend to detail, and accept the limits of time and energy. The quiet repetition of these simple actions, calm, endurance, and psychological steadiness, were nurtured as effectively as any physical skill. Clothing also served as a bridge between individual practice and communal rhythm. Observing the care others took with their garments, the way tunics were patched or sandals adjusted, reinforced subtle lessons in attention, respect, and patience. Shared practices in clothing maintenance became soft rituals, quietly connecting individuals across the courtyard and training yard. The psychology of these interactions was gentle yet profound. Cooperation, empathy, and awareness of others' care were woven into the fabric of daily life, fostering resilience and calm. Within the community, as the morning progressed and sunlight shifted across the yard, the simple garments continued their quiet role. They flexed, protected, and reminded their wearers of the rhythm of effort and care. Leather softened with movement, cloth stretched with breath, and straps adjusted to motion, all contributing to an ongoing dialogue between body, mind, and environment. The repetition of these small, attentive actions reinforced a calm psychological state, patience, focus, humility, and readiness. The wearer learned that strength is cultivated slowly, quietly, and attentively, in harmony with one's own pace and the rhythms of daily life. By midday, the psychological lessons embedded in simple garments were fully apparent. Tunics, sandals, and cloaks were more than fabric and leather. They were tools of endurance, attention, and mindfulness. Each repair, adjustment, and careful wear fostered until results, reinforcing the understanding that strength lies not in appearance or ornamentation, but in steady, deliberate practice, care for oneself, and patient repetition. In these humble items, the mind found calm, the body found comfort, and the rhythm of daily life became a gentle guide towards sustained strength and quiet as morning light stretched across the town, brushing the tops of tiled roofs and illuminating narrow streets where mist clung to cobblestones. In the distance, the first bell tolled softly, a deep sonorous note that rippled through the quiet air. Its sound lingered, bouncing gently off walls, rolling down alleys, and touching the courtyard, where men and women moved slowly in their morning routines. The bell was more than a tool. It was a companion to daily life, a subtle rhythm to which the town and its people attuned themselves. Its tone carried both reassurance and guidance, a gentle punctuation in the unfolding hours. Each toll was familiar, predictable, and in its predictability, it offered a quiet anchor for the mind, signaling the progression of the day in measured steps. Those who trained in the open courtyards were the first to respond to the morning call. A soft murmur of awareness spread as the deep vibrations touched the stones beneath their feet. Wooden posts, shields, and wine benches seemed to resonate with the sound, and even the faint clatter of tools in the yard paused for a moment in recognition. The psychology of these early sounds was subtle yet profound. The bell reminded practitioners that they were part of a larger rhythm, a gentle pattern that threaded together exercise, waiting, meals, and reflection. The mind learned to follow this cadence, finding comfort in the knowledge that each toll brought order to the otherwise fluid day. As the day unfolded, the bells continued their dialogue with the town. They tolled for meals, calling families to shared bread, broth, and ale. The sound carried across rooftops, through open windows, and down the narrow alleys, where children paused mid-step to listen. In the market, merchants momentarily lifted their gaze from baskets of produce and woven goods, acknowledging the familiar chime that reminded all that time moved, steadily, predictably, and without haste. Even the faintest acknowledgments, light nods, or quiet murmurs reflected the psychological comfort embedded in routine. Bells, through repetition and resonance, cultivated a shared sense of continuity, of structure, and of calm. Courtyards of stone and grass offered particularly intimate experiences of the bells. Men practicing with wooden swords paused mid-strike, their bodies unconsciously aligning with the rhythm of the toll. Shields leaning against walls seemed to hum faintly in sympathy, as if acknowledging the subtle vibrations. Those seated on benches or low stools absorbed the sound differently. It was not a call to action, but a gentle signal to remain present, attentive, and aware. Breath slowed instinctively, attention sharpened without tension, and even idle hands found purpose in adjusting tools, cleaning equipment, or smoothing worn fabric in tune with the bell's soft cadence. In these quiet spaces, the sound of bells became a meditation, a quiet teacher of patience and mental steadiness. The sound traveled, beyond courtyards winding through streets and alleys where daily life unfolded. Children playing quietly on sun-warmed stones paused to listen, tracing the echo as it bounced between walls. Birds shifted their perch, catching the vibrations with wings that fluttered softly. Dogs curled in doorways lifted ears briefly, and the faint stir of household activity, laundry being folded, bread being cut, water being drawn from wells blended seamlessly with the deep resonance. In every corner, the bell established a subtle psychological framework, an audible marker of time, a steady reminder that life progressed predictably, and that even amidst labor or uncertainty, there was rhythm, order, and gentle reassurance. Each bell carried distinct tonal qualities that reinforced its quiet authority. Larger bells produced long sonorous notes that lingered in the air, resonating with the chest holders of those who heard it. Smaller bells rang higher, clearer, with a more delicate touch, often signaling transience between smaller activities, such as the shift from practice to waiting, or from waiting to meals. The combination of tones created a layered soundscape, offering not only guidance but subtle cues for emotion. Hearing the right note at the right time helped to quiet anxiety, encourage focus, and reinforce the measured flow of daily life. Over time, these auditory cues became deeply embedded in memory, shaping responses to both ordinary and extraordinary events. Beyond their physical and emotional impact, bells also cultivated communal awareness. When a bell tolled, individuals did not react in isolation. The town, its courtyards, streets, and alleys collectively aligned with the sound. A shared recognition emerged. Heads tilted slightly, footsteps paused, hands rested for a moment, and eyes followed the movement of shadows in time, with note. The psychology of shared listening reinforced cohesion without coercion. Calm observance of communal patterns strengthened social bonds subtly, reminding all that they were participants in a network of attention and care that extended from one bell to the next, and from one person to another. Inside the training yards, the bells also shaped mental rehearsal. Men and women who practiced techniques of endurance or combat felt the rhythm of the toll resonate with their own internal pacing. Swords were raised, lowered, and swung in cadence with the faint echoes that lingered long after the metal had vibrated. The mind began to predict the pattern, allowing anticipation without anxiety, preparation without stress. Even when rested, the psychological rhythm persisted. The bell was a measure, a subtle framework within which attention, patience, and self-discipline were cultivated. During mealtimes, the sound of bells offered gentle guidance. A deep, sustained note reminded practitioners that it was time to pause, work, and nourish themselves. Bread was broken, cheese shared, and thin stew consumed quietly, each bite aligned, unconsciously with their rhythm of the toll. Conversation was soft, laughter gentle, and the psychological benefit of routine Bekamit and Jabel. The bell marked the day in digestible, calming increments. Eating became a practice of mindfulness, with awareness drawn subtly toward both sustenance and rhythm, merging physical and emotional balance in the gentle cadence of life. Bells also accompanied periods of waiting. When men paused between exercises or observed the movements of others, the toll served as a reassuring reminder of continuity. Time stretched with it pressure, each strike of metal against air reinforcing a sense of order and calm. The mind learned to inhabit these spaces without anxiety, finding comfort in both sound and silence. Each note became a small meditation, an auditory anchor that grounded thought and presence, offering a subtle mastery of internal state alongside external discipline. The material of the bells themselves contributed to their impact. Bronze and iron produced reverberance that carried through courtyards, homes, and streets with lingering resonance. The metal, shaped and struck carefully, echoed with precision, creating vibrations that the body could feel as well as the ear could hear. Standing nearby, one might notice a slight hum through the chest and shoulders, a physical sensation that reinforced awareness, patience, and calm focus. Over time, these tactile resonances were internalized, forming accurate, embodied understanding of rhythm and time that accompanied daily routines even in the absence of sound. Bells in sacred spaces added another dimension to their subtle psychological influence. Monasteries, chapels, and small shrines relied on their tones to guide prayer, reflection, and ritual. For those in training, observing these sounds intertwined practical and spiritual rhythms. Meditation, mindfulness, and endurance were all gently reinforced through auditory cues. The mind learned that calm and focus could coexist with community, that repetition and predictability were sources of quiet strength, and that external markers like the toll of a bell were deeply integrated with internal stability. Even the smallest, less resonant bells contributed. Handheld or mounted in modest chapels, they offered soft, higher-pitched notes that signaled minor transitions, the end of a discussion, the approach of a visitor, or the start of a small task. Their subtlety required attentiveness, training listener to notice quiet cues and respond with calm awareness. The psychology of attention cultivated through these small instruments reinforced the broader lessons of endurance, patience, and mindfulness observed throughout the courtyard and town. Over the course of the day, multiple bells marked the progression of time, weaving a tapestry of sound that gently threaded the experiences of all who lived in their range. The deep morning tolls gave way to the soft chimes of midday, which in turn faded into lighter notes as afternoon wore on. Each strike carried its own subtle emotional cue, reminding the listener to slow, focus, or prepare, and guiding body and mind without force or urgency. In this layered network of auditory markers, the town and its inhabitants moved together in a harmonious rhythm, each bell reinforcing the psychological architecture of calm endurance. In the evening, as shadows stretched across stone and grass, bells tolled less frequently, but their effect lingered. Even when silent, the mind remembered their pattern, anticipating the return of sound with familiarity and calm. Reflection on the day, quiet observation of tools, clothing, and movement all were subtly influenced by these auditory cues. The psychology of bells, embedded through repetition and resonance. Beckamia, constant companion, shaping awareness, patience, and inner steadiness, long after the final note had faded in. By the close of day, the town settled into quiet. Courtyards were emptying, benches were vacated, and tools rested in familiar places. Yet the lingering memory of each bell toll provided a continuous psychologicrathy, one that allowed inhabitants to transition from activity to rest with measured calm. The resonance of bells became a soft, internalized pulse of life itself, a gentle reminder of continuity, order, and the steady passage of time, a comforting echo that supported reflection, sleep, and the quiet preparation for the coming day. As dusk settled over the town, the streets softened into muted shades of gray and deep violet. Lanterns flickered along narrow alleys, their gentle light reflecting off cobblestones still warm from the day. Smoke rose lazily from chimneys, curling into the cool evening air with a faint scent of wood and herbs. Within the training yards and courtyards, men and women gathered in small clusters, their movements quiet and deliberate. The desertions had subsided, leaving muscles relaxed and minds seeking gentle reprieve. In this calm, stories began. Tomage not loudly, not urgently, but softly, like threads of smoke curling upward from a low fire. Seated on worn benches or on the edges of stone fountains, individuals leaned toward one another, their faces bathed in amber firelight. The flames danced across coarse tunics, highlighting the folds of fabric and the braided edges of leather straps. Voices were low, modulated to the intimacy of the circle, carrying tales from distant villages, farms, and marketplaces. Each story moved slowly, measured in words that unfolded patiently, as if the telling itself was a ritual, a quiet balm after hours of training and discipline. The psychology of these shared moments was subtle yet profound. In recounting the lives they left behind, listeners were reminded that their existence extended beyond practice, beyond routine, beyond the controlled rhythms of daily exertion. Some stories spoke of fields where wheat swayed in soft breezes, golden against the rising sun. Others recalled mornings by rivers, the surface shimmering with faint ripples as fish leaped quietly. Markets came alive in memory, stalls brimming with produce and woven goods, the scent of fresh bread mingling with that of earth and grass. These tales weren't all meant to boast or to entertain with spectacle, but to ground the mind in calm recollection. They acted as subtle reminders that life had dimensions beyond skill, strength, and endurance, moments of beauty, comfort, and simple joy that existed in gentle patterns, familiar routines, and sensory details. The sound of fire crackling punctuated the stories, offering an irregular but soothing rhythm. Ash drifted upward, faint sparks lifting toward the darkened sky before vanishing into shadow. Every now and then, a laugh or soft exhale punctuated a tail asmal release of tension that had built during the day. The laughter was gentle, never boisterous, a quiet acknowledgement of shared experience. It carried the psychological function of easing vigilance, of signaling that it was safe to relax and inhabit the softer edges of consciousness. In these moments, minds unwound from tight coils of preparation and focus, entering a state of reflective calm. Children sometimes lingered nearby, their eyes wide in wonder but movements subdued. They listened intently as adults recounted journeys to distant villages, simple chores in the fields, or the warmth of home fires in winter. These stories served as gentle initiation, introducing younger ears to a rhythm of life in which endurance, attention, and care were balanced with observation, reflection, and rest. The psychology of learning through quiet storytelling was subtle. Attached memory strengthened, and emotional understanding deepened, all within a framework that prioritized the calm, rhythm, and gentle engagement over urgency or spectacle. As tales unfolded, the storytellers often paused, allowing the quiet to fill the spaces between words. In the pause, listeners absorbed the details, the scent of baked bread, the rough texture of stone walls, the soft warmth of sunlight on arms, or the gentle tug of a rope basket on shoulders. These sensory details, imagined as vividly as if being experienced anew, anchored the mind in calm reflection. The act of recalling ordinary life in rich detail offered psychological comfort, reminding listeners that continuity existed beyond the immediate moment and that endurance was not only physical, but rooted in memory, identity, and shared experience. Some stories drifted toward humor, subtle and gentle, recalling mishaps in markets or misadventures in muddy fields. The laughter remained soft, an acknowledgement of human foibles rather than a call to exaggeration. The function was restorative. Each soft chuckle, relief attention, allowed the mind to settle and created a sense of intimacy within the group. In this way, shared narratives operated as psychological tools, fostering emotional regulation, group cohesion, and gentle reflection. Listeners felt lighter, more connected, and more attuned to the rhythms of life that extended beyond thick or the training yard. Firelight played across attentive faces, revealing slight smiles and the softened gaze of contemplation. Even those who rarely spoke allowed themselves to be carried along by the narrative, the gentle cadence of voice, and the images conjured by familiar words. The psychology of observation became clear. One could participate fully through listening, absorbing rhythms of thought, feeling, and memory without having to act immediately. In this quiet participation, resilience was nurtured, patience deepened, and attention was trained to notice subtleties in voice, gesture, and imagery that otherwise might be overlooked. Some evenings carried a reflective weight, as tales of family and home invoked longing or nostalgia. Yet even here, Thurtone remained gentle, focused on observation rather than yearning. Recollection was paired with acceptance, that separation from home was a natural rhythm of life, that endurance involved emotional steadiness as much as physical capacity. In these narratives, the psychology of containment and regulation was fostered softly. Thoughts of loved ones were balanced with the security of the present moment, and the mind learned to hold multiple layers of awareness without tension or distress. Stories sometimes incorporated small rituals, like tracing a line in the dirt with a finger to illustrate a path, or tapping a staff softly against the stones to punctuate an event. These gestures added visual and tactile elements, reinforcing attention and grounding margination. The interplay of words, gestures, and environmental cues created a subtle form of multi-sensory learning. The psychology at play encouraged focus, memory, and calm emotional engagement. Repetition, OFSAC, evenings established habitual cognitive patterns, reflection, and attention in a safe, predictable context. In many cases, stories extended into the practical, recounting the methods of fieldwork, tending animals, or preparing meals, became gentle instruction. Lessons about the pace of work, the attentiveness required in daily tasks, and the subtleties of observation were embedded in narrative. Yet all teaching was indirect, flowing naturally from storytelling rather than formal instruction. The mind absorbed these lessons while engaged in a relaxed state, allowing integration of skill, memory, and psychological readiness without pressure or stress. The social bonds formed through shared storytelling were subtle yet profound. Even in moments of silence between tools, the group maintained cohesion. The unspoken understanding of presence, attention, and mutual observation reinforced psychological safety. Individuals knew they were part of a network of calm attentiveness, where endurance was cultivated, not in isolation but through gentle observation and participation. This quiet connectivity nurtured resilience, social intelligence, and emotional steadiness, all of which were critical to the rhythm of everyday life in both the courtyard and the wider town. Outside, the night deepened and the firelight flicked, casting long shadows across stone and grass. The smell of smoldering wood mingled with faint evening moisture rising from the earth. The world was slow, almost suspended. In this ambient stillness, stories found room to breathe, to linger, to settle into memory. Each narrative became a thread, weaving individuals into a larger pattern of community, history, and subtle psychological stability. In this shared attentiveness, the mind could rest while still engaging, cultivating calm endurance, awareness, and reflection. As the evening progressed, stories often circled back to themes of care, preparation, and persistence. Tales of tending fields, repairing tools, mending garments, and maintaining daily routines reinforced the psychology of attentive, patient effort. Listeners absorbed not only the content but the tone, slow, deliberate, measured. The repetition of these ideas within narrative form established patterns of thought aligned with both resilience and calm, reinforcing the internal rhythm that guided both practice and rest. In quieter moments, attention shifted to the soft interplay of sound, light, and scent. The crackle of fire, the occasional shifting of benches, the distant bark of a dog emerged with the cadence of storytelling to create a gentle sensory environment. The mind, attuned to these subtle cues, cultivated a state of quiet vigilance paired with relaxation. The psychology of environmental attunement encored focus, patience, and a sense of grounded presence, reinforcing the benefits of narrative in shaping both emotion and awareness. Eventually, the fire burned low, casting long, dancing shadows across faces and stone floors. Stories slowed, pauses lengthened, and a sense of completion settled over the group. The psychology of closure was gentle. Each individual could carry the content of the stories inward, allowing reflection, memory, and emotional processing to continue in silence. This winding down was as essential as the stories themselves, embedding lessons of calm attentiveness, social connection, and psychological resilience into the quiet rhythm of the night. By the time lanterns dimmed and sleepers retired to modest beds, the echoes of shared stories lingered in thought and feeling. The mind had been engaged, yet rested. The heart had felt connection, yet maintained equanimity. Sleep arrived more readily, guided by images of rivers, fields, market stalls, and home fires, all rendered through the gentle medium of narrative. In these evenings, the psychology of calm, reflection, and social cohesion was cemented, preparing individuals for the challenges and routines of the coming day with quiet strength. The nights repeated this cycle with comforting regularity. As weeks and months passed, the familiarity of storytelling, combined with the rhythmic guidance of firelight, environmental cues, and gentle observation, nurtured a deep-seated calm. The mind learned to navigate uncertainty, to find solace in routine, and to engage with both the self and the community through reflection, memory, and shared experience. In this way, shared stories at night became more than entertainment. They became a foundation for emotional balance, attentional focus, and enduring psychological resilience. Morning light filtered through the narrow streets just beyond the town walls, casting long, soft shadows over cobblestones worn smooth by countless feet. The market began to stir quietly, not with the clamor of chaos, but with the gentle rhythm of daily necessity. Stalls lined the streets in neat rows, each bearing its own medestrizes, baskets of grain piled high, fish laid on beds of crushed ice or salted and dried for preservation, bundles of cloth dyed in soft, muted colors. The scent of freshly baked bread mingled with earthy fragrance from nearby fields, while the faint tang of salt from the river added depth to the morning air. This gentle mixture of aromas created a calm, grounded atmosphere, one that drew the townsfolk into a predictable rhythm of movement, attention, and exchange. For the fighters, stepping beyond the protective walls of their training yards was a subtle transition. The change in environment brought a different tempo to life, a softer, more flute cadence than the measured, repetitive movements of practice. Children darted between stalls with small baskets, their laughter muted but present, adding a light touch to the morning. Bakers, dusted with flour from early loaves, moved with care, turning trays and arranging bread, while nodding softly to familiar neighbors. Merchants weighed grain on wooden scales, adjusting the balance gently and exchanging low, courteous words with customers. Every interaction, small as it might have seemed, carried a rhythm, a sense of order, and psychological reassurance. Life beyond the training yards continued steadily, predictably, and with purpose. Fellow out of the market encouraged observation and subtle engagement. Narrow lanes between stalls meant that one could watch without being noticed, or walk slowly, absorbing details at leisure. Patterns of cloth folded neatly, the arrangement of pottery, and the rhythmic handling of baskets all provided gentle visual cues that the mind-oft observer could follow. Each movement, measured and consistent, offered lessons in attention and focus, reinforcing skills cultivated in training but applied in the broader context of ordinary life. Psychology here was grounded in calm observation. Noticing order, routine, and continuity helped to quiet internal tension, establishing a sense of control and presence without pressure. Stalls, selling vegetables and herbs, offered an of sensory experience. The green of young shoots, the vibrant purple of onions, and the warm brown after-red beans created a soft, harmonious palette. Fingers brushed over surfaces as customers and merchants interact, the tactile sensation reinforcing awareness and grounding attention. The mental effect was subtle. Acquiescent mindfulness emerged, shaped by repeated exposure to textures, colors, and scents that were both ordinary and familiar. Even the act of exchanging coins, handled slowly and deliberately, carried a minor yet meaningful lesson in patience and measured engagement. Fishmongers' tables added a rhythmic auditory layer to the market's environment. The soft clink of coins, the muted splash of water as ice was adjusted, and the occasional scrape of a knife across a cutting board created a low, steady background hum. This auditory rhythm reinforced psychological patterns developed in the training yards: attention, anticipation, and calm responsiveness, observing without urgency, listening without distraction, and moving without haste allowed the fighters to practice mindfulness in an ordinary, peaceful context. The market became, in effect, an extension of their earlier routines, transferring focus and discipline into a setting of gentle social interaction. Children's movements contributed to this environment of measured liveliness. Small feet padded lightly over stone, baskets occasionally brushing against ankles or resting momentarily on low walls. Their voices, soft and full of curiosity, reminded observers of continuity. Life was ongoing, playful, and adaptive. The psychology of presence was reinforced by these details. Noticing small patterns in movement, anticipating minor interactions, and observing social norms quietly trained the mind to remain aware without tension. In these ways, the market was both practical and educational, a place to exercise subtle attention and social cognition. Merchants offered repeated greetings to familiar patrons, their tones measured and warm. The rhythm of recognition, acknowledgement, and response created a social framework that reinforced predictability and calm. These interactions were not rushed. Pauses allowed both speaker and listener to adjust and respond thoughtfully. The repetition of small courteous rituals helped regulate emotion, providing the fighter with a psychological space that balanced focus with relaxation. Over time, the mind absorbed these patterns unconsciously, linking social rhythm with attention and inner steadiness. Markets also offered glimpses into cycles of daily life beyond the town walls. Fields beyond the stalls supplied produce and grain. Carts moved slowly from farms to stalls, and the smell of river water occasionally drifted through open spaces. Observing this broader ecosystem reminded the fighters of interconnectedness. Their work, training, and daily routines were part of a larger rhythm that extended beyond immediate duties. This perspective was calming, emphasizing continuity, contribution, and the general predictability of natural and social systems. Psychology here was about situational awareness paired with reflective detachment, learning to move within a flowing system while maintaining personal composure. The tactile nature of market transactions also offered subtle engagement. Coins, leather pouches, baskets, and weights were handled with care, reinforcing motor skills developed in practice while connecting these movements to broader social contexts. Attention to these small, repeated actions cultivated mindfulness and regulation. Each touch, exchange, and adjustment reinforced patience and subtle awareness of both self and environment. Even mundane interactions carried quiet psychological benefit, embedding habits of calm, deliberate observation in daily routines. The market also provided moments of sensory pause. Between transactions there were gentle silences, a child's brief pause to tie a shoelace, the quiet adjustment of a stall covering, or the soft ruffling of paper or cloth. These intervals were absorbed attentively, training the mind to notice and value stillness amidst minor activity. Such pauses reinforced the psychological principle of intermittent reflection, learning to inhabit the present moment without distraction or agitation, developing inner steadiness alongside external observation. Throughout the morning, weather added a subtle dynamic. Soft mist lifted from the river, cool breezes drifted through alleys, and warm sun gradually illuminated stalls, highlighting tints and colors. Observers adjusted clothing, shielded eyes, or leaned into the sun's warmth, each gesture reinforcing bodily awareness, comfort, and attentional presence. The psychology of environmental attunement was quietly at work, adapting to temperature, movement, and sensory input in harmony with one's surroundings. Cultive calm, grounded attentional control, and subtle resilience. Conversations, when they occurred, were hushed, measured, and observant. Questions were phrased gently, answers offered in even tones. These interactions reinforced patience and emotional regulation, encouraging listeners to absorb content with reactionary tension. Observers learned to modulate voice, movement, and posture to maintain social harmony, extending the lessons of discipline learned in training to civic life. Psychology here was subtle yet powerful. Practice of attention, empathy, and composure was integrated seamlessly into ordinary daily exchange. Merchants also provided visual lessons in endurance and care. Grain piled carefully, pottery arranged for balance, and fabrics displayed with attention demonstrated steady, deliberate labor. The observer, whether a fighter or townsperson, internalized these patterns. Careful work, patient arrangement, and mindful movement were reinforced in the context of social observation. This continuous interaction between environment, behavior, and perceptions subtly shaped cognition, emotional control, and the capacity for calm engagement with one's surroundings. The mid-morning bell tolled gently through the market, carrying the sound over stalls, rooftops, and alleys. The sound harmonized with the market's natural rhythm, signaling brief pauses. Merchants adjusted displays, customers counted coins more carefully, and observers allowed their minds to rest in the brief silence. This auditory cue reinforced temporal awareness, helping all present track passage of time without haste or stress. Psychology of rhythm and anticipation emerged. The mind learned to flow with predictable patterns while maintaining attention and composure. As the morning shifted toward midday, the pace of market activity softened slightly. Children tired, moving slower or resting against benches. Sellers wiped sweat from foreheads or adjusted straw hats, while townsfolk paused occasionally to savor the smell of fresh bread or observe a neighbor's handiwork. The psychology of observation and awareness deepened. Noticing minor shifts, maintaining attention, and absorbing small sensory details became habitual, offering both cognitive stimulation and calming routine. Observers, in their quiet attentiveness, strengthened resilience, memory, and emotional steadiness. By afternoon, the market began to thin. Stalls were slowly packed, baskets emptied, and the hum of conversation grew quieter. Observers took stock of their surroundings, the patterns of movement, the spatial arrangement of stalls, and the ebb of activity. Psychology here was reflective. Awareness extended beyond immediate interaction to consideration of flow, order, and environmental changes. The mind learned to anticipate, adapt, and remain calm amidst subtle change, reinforcing patterns of patience, attentional control, and emotional steadiness. By evening, streets emptied further. Sunlight faded into soft amber and violet. Lanterns lit, and the town prepared to settle into quieter routines. Observers left the market, carrying impressions of order, rhythm, and calm engagement. The psychology of the day anchored in observation, gentle participation, and sensory awareness remained with them. Lessons of patience, attentional control, and reflection were internalized subtly, shaping both behavior and perception long after the bustle had faded. Silence arrived slowly, first as a faint hush that settled over the training yards, then spreading across courtyards, narrow streets, and the stone interiors of sleeping halls. The day's activities, the rhythmic clack of wooden swords, the soft thud of sandbags, the murmured conversations at meals faded into memory, leaving a gentle, almost tangible quiet. Even the wind seemed subdued, carrying only the soft rustle of leaves or the distant ripple of water along canals and streams. In this enveloping hush, every sound, however small, became noticeable. The gentle creak of a bench under shifting weight, the faint movement of fabric as someone adjusted their tunic, Ord's slow exhale of a sleeping figure. Silence, in its expansive reach, was both a presence and a guide, inviting attention to what was often overlooked in busier hours. Within these quiet spaces, minds began to wander, neither idly, but with calm deliberation. Thoughts of home drifted naturally into consciousness, memories of hearths and fires, of families gathered for evening meals, of the smell of bread baking or grain roasting in fields. These reflections were neither urgent nor painful. Rather, they settled softly into awareness, like leaves floating on a calm stream. The psychology of memory in silence was subtle. Recollection provided comfort, a gentle tether to familiarity, grounding individuals in continuity despite distance, fatigue, or uncertainty. In learning to inhabit silence, people also learned to inhabit themselves, to sit with thoughts without judgment or agitation. Courtyards emptied of movement became arenas of quiet reflection. Stone walls and arches, once echoing with practice and conversation, now held only the faintest reverberations of past footsteps. Shadows lengthened across uneven paving stones, softening edges and creating gentle patterns of light and dark. Within this interplay, the mind found opportunity for contemplation. Eyes adjusted to dimness, noticing small details. The curve of a column, the texture of moss creeping along bricks, the tiny scurry of a mouse or lizard. These observations encouraged attentiveness without urgency, fostering a slow, deliberate awareness of environment that mirrored steadiness of thought cultivated in solitude. Silence also carried with it a duality. For some, it could feel heavy, almost oppressive at first, drawing attention to quiet anxieties, doubts about skill, memories of failures, all subtle fears of the unknown. Yet, as awareness deepened, this weight transformed into a tool for reflection and mental training. By sitting with silence, by allowing attention to rest upon both fears and comforts equally, individuals cultivated endurance of the mind. The psychology of this process was akin to controlled breathing. Inhale awareness of tension, exhale into calm observation, and gradually the mind grew accustomed to holding stillness without agitation. Sleeping halls offered another dimension to silence. Low wooden bunks lined stone floors, each occupied by a figure resting after long hours of preparation. The faint rise and fall of breath, the occasional shift in posture, and the subtle creaking of furniture under weight became rhythmic markers in the vista quiet. In these spaces, sleep was welcomed as a continuation of silence, a gentle surrender of thought into unconscious processing. Yet even as bodies rested, the mind remained subtly engaged, absorbing patterns, reinforcing routines, and integrating lessons learned through the day. The psychology of rest, intertwined with silence, cultivated resilience, the ability to recover, reflect, and prepare without urgency or force. Meditation or prayer often took place within this hushed environment. Individuals knelt quietly on simple mats, hands folded, eyes lowered. Words were spoken softly, if at all, more as an internal dialogue than as communication. The rhythm of breath matched the cadence of thought, slow, even reflective. In this combination of physical stillness and mental focus, the psychology of endurance was refined. Strength was not demonstrated outwardly, but nurtured inwardly, rooted in awareness, patience, and the capacity to inhabit silence comfortably. Outside Thuol's nature complemented this quietude. Trees bent slightly in soft wind, their leaves whispering faintly, adding subtle layers to the soundscape. Birds, roosting or preparing to settle for the night, called occasionally, their voices brief and unhurried. Water from nearby streams or fountains flowed gently, echoing the soft, persistent rhythm of life. The interaction between these natural cues and human awareness reinforced calm attentiveness. Minds that had been trained to notice subtle patterns within the courtyard or hall now extended this skill to wider surroundings, learning that silence was not absence but a form of enriched perception. Even mundane tasks conducted in silence carried subtle significance. Sweeping floors, arranging tools, mending garments, or tending small fires required attention but allowed space for thought. The rhythm of motion repeated, measured, and a bridge between external activity and internal calm. Each motion became a form of meditation. The brush of broom against stone, the folding of cloth, or the gentle tap of a hammer in mending leather engaged both body and mind in a quiet dialogue. This form of deliberate laboring forced psychological resilience, nurturing focus, patience, and subtle emotional regulation. The weight of silence also shaped social interaction. Even when individuals spoke, voices were low, careful, and deliberate. Conversations were mindful, brief, reflective, and respectful of the overall hush. Listening became an active practice, requiring attention, empathy, and modulation of response. Through these social dynamics, psychology of cooperation, shared understanding, and subtle communication was cultivated. Silence became a container for allowing connection without overstimulation, engagement without tension, and shared presence without noise. In the deeper hours, as night settled fully, the psychological effects of silence became more profound. The mind, freed from external distraction, could trace patterns of thought, memory, and reflection. Experiences of the day practice, meals, market visits, social exchanges were revisited gently, analyzed in soft mental narration, and integrated into long-term learning. The brain consolidated skills, routines, and observations, while the body recovered from exertion. In this synergy, silence was both restorative and educational, a quiet mentor guiding endurance, observation, and emotional stability. The sensory world in silence was heightened subtly. The faint creak of a door, the rustle of fabric, or the distant bark of a dog, beach accompaniment, markers of space and time. Awareness of these microsounds cultivated attention to detail, reinforcing habits of mindfulness and calm vigilance. The mind learned to track minor patterns without tension, appreciating small events as integral components of a wider environmental tapestry. In this way, silence enriched perception, embedding habits of attentional focus that extended beyond immediate activity into everyday life. As night deepened, attention turned inward naturally. Thoughts wandered through memories of home fires, the scent of fields, or the feel of familiar garments. Reflections on personal endurance, discipline, and small victories occupied a gentle mental space. In silence, these reflections were free of judgment or pressure, allowing acceptance and subtle self-assessment. The psychology of quiet reflection reinforced self-awareness, emotional regulation, and the ability to inhabit solitude comfortably. These capacities, nurtured slowly in the hush of evening, became essential components of long-term resilience and adaptability. Even small sensory pleasures were amplified in silence. The warmth of a hearth, the softness of a blanket, the faint aroma of bread or herbs, or the cool touch of evening air, all became anchors of mindfulness. Attentiveness to these minor details promoted psychological grounding. The mind learned to inhabit present sensations fully, balancing reflection on past events with appreciation of immediate comfort. This balance cultivated emotional steadiness, attentional control, and subtle cognitive flexibility, enabling individuals to navigate both routine and unforeseen circumstances with calm composure. Over time, nights of silence established patterns of psychological endurance. By habitually inhabiting stillness, individuals became accustomed to observing thoughts without agitation, regulating emotion without effort, and integrating sensory experience with reflection. The mind learned that silence was not emptiness, but a rich environment for growth, contemplation, and preparation. Patience deepened, focus sharpened, and subtle emotional resilience emerged, all within the quiet rhythm of evening stillness. As dawn approached and the first soft light crept through windows, courtyards, and halls, the residual calm of silence lingered. The body, refreshed, and the mind, trained in reflective observation, were ready to meet the day with steadiness. The psychological benefits of silence, patience, attentional control, emotional regulation, and inner resilience had been subtly reinforced, preparing the individual for the repetition, discipline, and quiet challenges of the coming hours. In this way, the weight of silence was never oppressive. It was a gentle guide, shaping endurance, presence, and the quiet strength of mind. Even as morning sounds slowly returned, the soft clatter of utensils, the faint murmur of voices, the distant movement of carts, the effects of night's silence, individuals carried attentional awareness and emotional calm into new activity, integrating lessons learned in stillness into action. The psychology of habit, subtly nurtured through quiet observation and reflection, became part of the daily rhythm, reinforcing both mental and emotional equilibrium. By embracing the weight of silence, one learned the art of endurance, not just in body, but in mind, preparing for all the subtle, persistent challenges of life, in measured, calm, and reflective ways. Morning light crept gently over the horizon, brushing the edges of rooftops and walls with muted gold. Within training yards, courtyards, and sleeping halls, life unfolded slowly, guided by ritual. Small, deliberate actions punctuated each day, creating a quiet, steady rhythm that reinforced calm and predictability. Even before the first stirrings of activity, the world seemed shaped by the repetition of tasks. Benches placed just so, mats rolled carefully, tools aligned neatly along walls. These routines, familiar and unhurried, prepared both body and mind for the demands ahead, offering a sense of control amidst uncertainty. The psychology of ritual was subtle but profound. In repeated, measured gestures, the mind found reassurance, stability, and continuity. Each day began with the same small attentions. Sandals, simple and worn, were tied in consistent patterns, knots doubled and tucked with care. Leather straps were checked and adjusted, ensuring that they rested comfortably against skin, neither too tight nor too loose. Hands moved deliberately, repeating gestures learned over months and years. In this repetition, fighters discovered a quiet pleasure, the satisfaction of precision, the predictability of outcome, and the gentle rhythm of movement. This tactile engagement provided a steady anchor for the mind, reinforcing patience, attentional focus, and emotional calm. Morning meals followed similar patterns. Bread was broken into measured portions, cheese sliced evenly, and bowls of watered wine or ale poured slowly. Each movement was deliberate, and the act of sharing food with others was conducted with soft courtesy and calm attentiveness. Conversation, if it arose, was measured and respectful, reinforcing social bonds without haste or tension. Even the smallest acts, passing a cup, adjusting a chair, wiping a surface, were performed mindfully, merging the practical with the meditative. These rituals of daily life allowed individuals to inhabit their surroundings fully, linking body, mind, and social awareness into a seamless rhythm. In the training yards, repetition took on a slightly different character. Wooden swords, leather straps, and shields were aligned meticulously before practice. The act of arranging equipment was itself a ritual, a quiet preparation that reinforced readiness, focus, and calm expectation. When movements began, they were measured, performed slowly at first, then gradually gaining confidence without haste. Repetition here served dual purposes: skill refinement and psychological gola. By performing each action mindfully, fighters cultivated both mastery of their craft and steadiness of mind, learning to move within a rhythm that balanced effort with attention. Even gestures of self-care followed ritualized patterns. Hands were rubbed with oil, palms pressed together in preparation for training or rest. Cloaks were folded carefully before sleep, blankets smoothed over bunks, and mats rolled or arranged in These small acts were more than functional. They were meditative, grounding the mind in the present while offering reassurance against uncertainty. The repetition of familiar motions created psychological pratik, a steady framework within which individuals could inhabit their day with calm attentiveness, beyond individual routines. Communal rituals reinforced shared rhythm. Morning announcements, the tolling off belt, or collective preparation of training spaces provided gentle structure to the day. Everyone moved in concert, each action complementing another in measured succession. These patterns cultivated a sense of belonging, mutual observation, and shared responsibility. The mind, witnessing and participating in coordinate action, absorbed lessons of cooperation, attentional focus, and subtle emotional regulation. Ritual here was a social scaffold, maintained order, reinforced calm, and strengthened bonds of collective endurance. Event minor elements, like the handling of equipment, carried ritualized significance. Swords were wiped clean, shields checked for splinters, and leather straps inspected for wear. Each task was performed with care and mindfulness, forming a consistent cadence of movement that reinforced focus and presence. The psychology behind this meticulous attention was profound. By controlling small, deliberate elements of the day, individuals gained a sense of agency and stability, easing anxiety about the unknown and reinforcing resilience of mind and body. Meals between training sessions also followed subtle rituals. Cups were held with both hands, bread broken slowly, and conversations maintained in hushed tones. Observers noted the behavior of others, learned patterns of interaction, and practiced patience. The repetition of meals, like all other rituals, created a framework for psychological regulation. The predictability of timing, actions, and interaction offered reassurance, shaping both emotional equilibrium and cognitive stability. In such structured, quiet, minds learned to dwell in themen, absorbing details and sensations without distraction or stress. Rituals extended into the spatial arrangement of spaces as well. Courtyards were swept methodically, tools aligned, benches placed with precision. Even the simplest acts, adjusting the position of a mat, straightening a wooden post, or aligning a row of swords, carried quiet significance. These gestures reinforced attentional control, precision, and establishing a harmonious environment that mirrored internal mental order. Observers absorbed these patterns unconsciously, linking environmental cues with psychological stability. Personal grooming also followed ritualized patterns. Hair was combed and tied in consistent styles. Minor injuries tended with care and were checked, folded, or repaired. Each act was performed deliberately, with attention to detail and rhythm. The repetition of these small tasks provided a subtle anchor for the mind, reinforcing patience, attentional focus, and resilience. In attending carefully to the minutiae of daily life, individuals cultivate endurance and steadiness of both body and mind. Rituals of preparation also included prayer or meditation. Simple gestures, kneeling on mats, folding hands, bowing heads, were performed consistently. Breath followed a measured pattern, synchronizing with movement and mental focus. The psychology of ritual in these moments was layered. Repetition provided a sense of continuity. Physical alignment reinforced attentional focus, and the quiet of space allowed reflective thought. In this combination, ritual became a vehicle for mental resilience, cultivating patience, stability, and emotional regulation. Even transitions between tasks were ritualized. The shift from meals to training, from training to rest, from rest to reflection, each change was accompanied by deliberate movement and mental adjustment. Clothing was checked, equipment arranged, and spaces readied with care. These transitional rituals reinforced attentional continuity and emotional preparedness. By consciously marking beginnings and endings, the mind was able to navigate change without abruptness, cultivating steady endurance and calm adaptability. The repetition of ritual across days created long-term psychological benefits. Habits became ingrained, reducing cognitive load and minimizing stress in unfamiliar situations. Even when tasks varied slightly, the underlying structure provided a familiar framework, fostering security and predictability. The mind, trained through repeated, deliberate action, became adept at maintaining focus, regulating emotion, and sustaining energy. This was subtle but profound. The power of ritual lay not in spectacle, but in continuity, patience, and the reinforcement of resilience over time. Communal rituals strengthened social cohesion. Shared tasks, arranging the training yard, preparing meals, or maintaining equipment, were performed quietly, with attention to both self and neighbor. Observers learned to anticipate his movements, synchronize actions, and respect shared rhythm. Psychology of social coordination was developed gently. Attention, empathy, and patience grew naturally through repeated, ritualized interaction. Even small gestures, passing a tool, adjusting a mat, or offering a portion of food reinforced trust, respect, and calm connection. As evening approached, rituals shifted toward closure. Equipment was cleaned, spaces arranged, and garments prepared. For rest, small gestures, repeated daily, marked the transition from activity to reflection, from engagement to repose. These evening rituals reinforced calmness, attentional control, and subtle emotion. The mind and body were reminded of the predictability of the world, the continuity of routine, and the reassurance of preparation. Even as shadows lengthened and lanterns flickered to life, the rhythm of ritual persisted, offering comfort and grounding. Night rituals were especially significant. Folding cloaks, adjusting blunks, placing sandals carefully at bedside, and checking personal space were performed with attention to detail. Breath slowed, movements softened, and the mind absorbed the consistency of repetition. These actions were minor in effort but major in effect, fostering psychological steadiness and reinforcing calm attentiveness. By observing and participating in these rituals, individuals carried forward resilience, mindfulness, and quiet composure into sleep, consolidating lessons of endurance and preparedness. Over weeks and months, the cumulative effect of daily ritual became profound. Mental clarity, emotional regulation, and attentional focus were strengthened through repetition. Even when unexpected challenges arose, the mind responded with composure, grounded in the experience of consistent, predictable practice. The psychology of ritual anchoring attention, reinforcing stability, and cultivating patience provided a framework for navigating uncertainty without anxiety or agitation. The rhythm of repetition became a foundation for resilience, endurance, and quiet confidence. Ultimately, the comfort of ritual lay in its predictability and gentle guidance. Each knotted, each cloak folded, each brush of oil or adjustment of garment was more than an action. It was a thread in a larger tapestry of stability and attentiveness. Mind, body, and environment harmonized, reinforcing patterns of focus, patience, and psychological endurance. The subtle power of repetition was invisible but tangible, shaping both behavior and perception in ways that nurtured calm, resilience, and quiet mastery over daily life. Stone was everywhere. It formed the walls of sleeping halls, the benches lining courtyards, the paving of narrow streets, and the bases of fountains where water trickled gently. Its presence was silent yet pervasive, a constant companion in daily life. In the early morning, when the world was still wrapped in mist and dew, stone felt cool to the touch, almost damp from the lingering moisture. Fingers brushed along carved edges or smooth surfaces, feet pressed against cobblestones, softened by early light, and hands rested on walls that had witnessed. This quiet interaction with the material created a sense of stability and continuity, a grounding force in a world where human lives were fragile and fleeting. The psychology of stone was subtle but profound. Unlike wood or cloth, which aged, warped, or frayed with time, stone endured. It reminded those who rested upon it or leaned against it that some things remained steady, unaffected by fatigue or fleeting emotion. In touching stone, one felt connected to a continuity that surpassed one's own experience. The grooves worn smooth by countless hands and feet were small, gentle testaments to endurance, hinting at a rhythm of life that persisted beyond individual effort. In this presence, minds quieted, attention softened, and the heart slowed its anxious beat. Stone courtyards were particularly significant. After training, individuals often sought the coolness of a low wall or a carved bench. Muscles ached lightly, breath settled into a measured rhythm, and the hand resting on stone offered a tactile anchor to the present. Here, the mind wandered gently, reflecting on simple observations: a leaf drifting across paving stones, a bird hopping along the edge of a fountain, the distant hum of townsfolk beginning their morning routines. Each small detail was framed against the permanence of stone, reinforcing a sense of calm, attentiveness, and connection to the enduring world. Even in sunlit hours, stone held quiet significance. Paving warmed slowly beneath gentle sunlight, radiating comfort without abrupt heat. Fingers brushed along edges of carved stones, noticing subtle imperfections, faint grooves, and areas worn smooth by these textures, felt through touch and observation, became small meditative exercises, focusing attention on detail, observing subtle differences, and learning the rhythm of patience. The mind, in this quiet interaction, developed steadiness, focus, and subtle resilience. Stone, silent and unmoving, served as a teacher in thought of calm endurance. In sleeping halls, stone provided both practical and psychological support. Bunks rested upon stone foundations, mats were placed upon paving, and simple hearths were framed by rounds. Even while lying down, the proximity to stone offered reassurance, a tactile reminder of stability, permanence, and continuity. The psychology here was gentle: touch stone, feel its coolness or warmth, and bear reminded that life carries rhythms beyond immediate perception, that endurance is possible, and that some aspects of the world remain steady even when human effort falters. Stone was also a subtle marker of passage. Steps worn unevenly by countless feet told stories of movement and repetition. Courtyards smoothed by daily traffic reflected patterns of life, where people gathered, where tools were placed, where rituals occurred. Even these smallest grooves held the weight of history, whispering lessons of patience, steadiness, and attention. By observing these details, individuals learned to track patterns without hurry, to see continuity in change, and to inhabit their environment with awareness and calm. The psychology of observation intertwined with tactile experience, deepening attentional focus and fostering a gentle resilience. Walls made of stone offered both protection and perspective. Leaning against a rough-hewn wall after a day of exertion, one felt supported in ways both physical and mental. The coolness against the back, the weight beneath the palm, the subtle texture of chiseled surfaces all contributed to a slow, calming rhythm of attention. Thoughts drifted, reflections surfaced, and muscles relaxed. The mind, anchored by tactile feedback, learned to inhabit a present moment free of pressure or urgency. The endurance of stone mirrored the endurance of daily practice, reinforcing subtle lessons of persistence, focus, and calm observation. Even the smallest stones carried significance. Pebbles in courtyards, fragments in pathways, or chipped remnants from walls reminded observers of the quiet passage of time. Each tiny piece held memory, footsteps across it, tools brushed against it, and whether that wore it slowly. Attentive interaction with these minor details reinforced mindfulness, observing without judgment, noting without hurry, and inhabiting the present without distraction. In the gentle awareness of stone's texture, weight, and permanence, minds learned patience, emotional steadiness, and the subtle art of enduring both effort and waiting. Stone was also central to ritual. Courtyards and halls often incorporated carved stone elements, simple benches, low walls for meditation, or bases for small statues. Even the act of walking along stone paths was ritualized, each step measured and deliberate. This repetition, framed by the permanence of stone, reinforced psychological patterns of attentional focus and calm reflection. Movements became meditative, observation became structured, thoughts settled into rhythms aligned with physical activity. Stone offered stability in both environment and mind, reinforcing calm endurance throughout the day. The presence of stone also encouraged reflection on mortality and time. Its permanence contrasted with the fleeting nature of human life, creating gentle awareness of impermanence without anxiety. Leaning on a sun-warmed wall, touching a cold paving stone, or observing worn steps, individuals were reminded of the continuum of life, generations past and future, patterns repeating quietly, life moving slowly forward. This reflection did not provoke fear but nurtured acceptance, humility, and quiet contemplation. Psychological endurance grew as minds learned to inhabit both presence and continuity. Zemulius, even during social interactions, stone provided a grounding effect. Conversations held along stone benches were slower, softer, measured. Touching a stone while speaking or listening subtly reinforced attention focus, encouraging patience, empathy, and awareness of subtle cues. Small gestures, adjusting posture against a wall, resting a hand on a stone surface, or leaning slightly forward, enhanced both mindfulness and emotional regulation. Shared attention to the environment, even in minimal ways, strengthened calm, mutual understanding, and steady psychological engagement. Stone also played a role in recovery and healing. After exertion or minor injuries, sitting on a cool stone bench or pressing a sore hand against a smooth surface provided gentle relief. The tactile feedback offered comfort, reinforcing calm awareness and supporting psychological recovery. Observing small details in the stone's texture, noticing shifts in temperature, or tracing subtle patterns in its surface created meditative engagement that complemented vessel rest. In this way, stone facilitated both mental and bodily resilience, promoting subtle, long-term psychological health. Even small environmental changes emphasized stone's enduring presence. Morning dew, sunlight, shadow, or weathering shifted perception slightly, but the fundamental stability remained. Pavements, walls, and carved edges were constant, offering reassurance that some elements of the world persisted despite change. Awareness of this stability nurtured psychological balance. Attention could wander gently without losing orientation. Reflection could deepen without distraction. And calm endurance was reinforced through repeated engagement with consistent, reliable surfaces. Stone surfaces also guided practice. In training yards, placing hands, feet, or tools upon specific points became habitual, reinforcing both physical alignment and attentional focus. The tactile memory of stone surfaces served as feedback, creating a quiet dialogue between body and environment. Movements became deliberate, rhythmical, and meditative, while the mind absorbed lessons of attentional steadiness, emotional regulation, and resilience. Stone, in this sense, was both instructor and companion, silently shaping both skill and psychology over time. Even small acts, like dusting surfaces or arranging tools along stone benches, became ritualized, reinforcing attentional focus, patience, and calm endurance. Movements performed with mindfulness, attention to texture, and awareness of permanent, subtle cognitive habits, observation, anticipation, and reflection. Stone surfaces provided a constant anchor, supporting these practices in both individual and communal contexts. Nightfall highlighted stone's general influence. Shadows deepened, temperatures cooled, and surfaces shifted from sun-warmed comfort to even inkle, leaning against walls, walking along courtyards, or sitting on benches. Individuals experienced the subtle feedback of stone, the persistence of shape, the contrast of temperature, the tactile texture beneath fingertips. Minds quieted naturally, attention slowed, and reflection deepened. The psychology of endurance, focus, and calm awareness was reinforced, preparing both body and mind for rest. Through months and years, interaction with stone shaped both habit and perspective. The continuity of surfaces, the predictability of texture and temperature, and the subtle reminders of permanence cultivated steady attentional control, emotional regulation, and reflective capacity. Individuals learned to inhabit moments fully, to observe subtly, and to endure patiently. Stone, silent and immovable, offered a gentle yet profound teacher in the art of calm persistence. Even their smallest stones carried lessons. Pebbles along a path, fragments in corners, or chips in walls provided opportunities for focused attention and mindful engagement. Observing differences in size, shape, or texture encouraged attentional awareness without urgency or effort. These small exercises, repeated over time, reinforced subtle psychological habits, mindfulness, patience, resilience, and calm observation. The continuity of stone's presence anchored both daily activity and long-term psychological growth. Stone also shaped social experience. Communal spaces lined with benches, courtyards paved with cobblestones, and walls that defined shared halls encouraged measured interaction. Conversations slowed, gestures softened, and attentional focus included both self and surroundings. Psychological benefits included enhanced empathy, attentional regulation, and social cohesion. Stone subtly mediated human behavior, shaping calm, engagement, steady endurance, and reflective participation in shared environments. Finally, as the day drew to a close, stone remained a quiet companion. Surfaces cooled in the fading light, textures were felt through touch, and presence was acknowledged through quiet attention. Leaning, resting, observing, or simply existing alongside stone, individuals absorbed lessons of permanence, resilience, and patience. Minds settled naturally into reflection and calm, preparing for night, rest, and the quiet rhythms of another day. The psychology of stone was simple, profound, and enduring. By inhabiting and observing it, humans cultivated calm, attentional steadiness, and reflective endurance, ready to meet life with measured presence and quiet strength. In the quiet of medieval courtyards and streets, life moved with a measured rhythm, shaped not only by human endeavor, but also by the gentle presence of animals. Dogs lingered near doorways, their ears flicking at distant sounds, noses tracing the sense of early morning dew. Cats slinked between walls, weaving in and out of shadow, their steps silent and deliberate. Birds called from towers, fluttered between beams, or alighted up in windowsills, their chirps and wings adding a gentle rhythm to the day. These creatures moved freely, unaware of human concerns or contests of skill and endurance, yet their presence offered a subtle companionship that ensured minds and hearts alike. The psychology of animals in these spaces was quiet and steady, a reminder that life extended beyond strict schedules, that attention could be shared gently, and that comfort could be drawn from simple observation. Dogs, often tethered lightly, or permitted to roam courtyards, carried themselves with calm attentiveness. They sniffed at the edges of benches, padded along stone pavements, and rested at the feet of those sitting in reflection. Their presence required no words, no effort, beyond silent acknowledgement. To watch a dog curl near a hearth, to notice the slow wag of its tail, was to absorb a gentle rhythm of life unaffected by the anxieties or ambitions that preoccupied humans. This quiet companionship allowed observers to pause, to align their attention with the simplicity of another living being's movement, and to experience psychological ease without judgment or expectation. Cats, in contrast, moved with a sinuous grace, slipping through narrow space and climbing beams with quiet precision. They paused occasionally to watch the world below, eyes bright and focused, tails curling in gentle arcs. For those training or resting in courtyards, the movement of cats became a soft meditation, their unpredictable yet graceful patterns offering both attention, training, and quiet amusement. observing a cat leap lightly from wall to roof. One's mind followed without effort, noting detail, movement, and the psychology of attention here was subtle. Engagement without strain, observation without urgency, mindfulness without structure imposed. Birds, ever present in towers, rafters, and treetops, provided a soundtrack to daily life. Their calls were gentle markers of time, punctuating the morning, midday, and evening with familiar tones. Watching a bird take flight, ride a gentle breeze, or settle on a windowsill allowed minds to wander without haste, creating an awareness of rhythm, timing, and spatial relationships. Even when silent, their presence of wings or feathers encouraged calm attentiveness, teaching that awareness could be maintained without tension, and that beauty could be found in simplicity. In communal spaces, animals facilitated social connection in subtle ways. Dogs resting near multiple individuals encouraged shared attention. Cats passing between benches invited gentle observation and quiet amusement. Their actions, free from the expectations and pressures of human interaction, offered relief from the constant mental planning and vigilance associated with daily routines. Observing animals in shared spaces fostered a gentle psychological harmony, empathy, and subtle social coordination without requiring explicit instruction. The early morning was a particularly gentle time for animal observation. Dew-coated cobblestones and grass, softening the movement of paws and claws. Dogs stretched, cats flexed, and birds flitted between rooftops, all while humans prepared for their own routines. Watching these creatures interact with the environment encouraged an awareness of subtle details, the sheen of wet fur, the faint sound of claws on stone, the light catching on feathers. Such observations round attention, drawing focus outward, without urgency, and allowed humans to inhabit the present momentfully. Animals also provided a gentle reminder of physicality, the flex of a dog's legs as it stretched, the arch of a cat's back before a jump, the effortless glide of a bird in flight, all mirrored human experiences of body and movement. Observing these natural forms encouraged reflection on one's own body, posture, breathing, flexibility, and awareness. This mirror effect fostered mindfulness, allowing humans to learn subtle lessons about alignment, endurance, and rhythm without formal instruction or conscious effort. Courtyards and streets also offered opportunities for interaction with animals in small, comforting ways. A dog might follow a person along stone paving, pausing occasionally for sniffing or rest. A cat might weave between legs, brushing lightly against garments. These interactions required minimal effort, yet provided psychological nourishment, companionship, which it demanded, awareness without urgency, and comfort without expectation. The mind, in attending to these interactions, relaxed and engaged gently with life beyond the structured routines of training and daily labor. Animals also marked time in subtle ways. Dogs, morning stretches, cats, midday rests, and birds, evening return to a roost, acted as soft indicators of the passing day. Humans, observing these patterns, experienced a calm sense of rhythm. Life continued with consistency, independent of immediate human concerns. This external measure of time provided reassurance, reducing anxiety and reinforcing attentional steadiness. The quiet observance of animal behavior created an internal mirror of patience, consistency, and subtle endurance. Even minor interactions carried significance. A dog's nuzzle or soft whine, a cat's purring as it rested, or the sudden flutter of wings reminded humans of connection beyond immediate obligations. These gentle reminders reinforce emotional regulation. Attention could be shared, empathy exercised, and patience nurtured. In turn, observing animals provided subtle instruction in emotional steadiness, teaching that life could unfold calmly, with attention to detail, rhythm, and presence. During communal meals or gatherings, animals remained quietly nearby, often lying at the edges of benches or curling beneath tables. Their non-demanding presence encouraged soft focus and reduced social tension. Individuals could feed, pet, or merely observe these creatures, fostering mindfulness, gentle social engagement, and psychological calm. The subtle lessons of these interactions carried forward patience, attentional stability, and awareness of rhythms beyond one's own control. Animals also provided opportunities for reflective observation. Watching a cat stalk shadows, a dog tilt its head at movement, or a bird adjust its perch encouraged detailed awareness without stress or competition. The mind practiced attention, prediction, and gentle curiosity. Unlike human interactions, animals did not require negotiation or evaluation. This allowed individuals to engage in calm observation, reinforcing cognitive focus and emotional regulation in a relaxed, low-stakes environment. Courtyards with animals often became spaces of quiet learning. Young individuals could follow the path of a bird, noting timing and movement. Observers could trace the arc of a cat's jump, understanding balance and spatial awareness subtly. Dogs' reactions to environmental change provided lessons in anticipation and calm response. Through observation alone, humans absorbed lessons of rhythm, timing, and subtle adaptation, all without explicit instruction or pressure. These quiet studies fostered patience, attentional control, and gentle mental endurance. Animals also encouraged awareness of environment. Dogs sniffed pathways, cats climbed walls, and birds alighted on rooftops, drawing attention to textures, sounds, and subtle shifts in air and light. Humans, in following or observing these patterns, deepened spatial awareness, perception, and sensory mindfulness. The psychology of attentiveness developed naturally. Observation became imitation, interaction became reflection, and care became habitual. Even in moments of rest, animals provide gentle grounding. A dog's rhythmic breathing, a cat's soft purr, or the distant call of a bird offered markers of life and continuity. These small sensory inputs encouraged the mind to inhabit the present, focus attention softly, and allow the body to relax. In this way, animals mediated psychological calm, supporting both rest and reflective observation. Seasonal changes added further depth to the observation of animals. In spring, the soft chatter of fledgling birds, kittens playing in courtyards, or pups exploring new paths offered a gentle energy, encouraging mindfulness and appreciation of growth. Summer heat highlighted cool stone surfaces, shaded resting places, and slow movements, all interacting with animal rhythms. Autumn brought soft rustling through leaves, quiet stretches of movement, and subtle cues of environmental change. Winter emphasized slow steps, careful observation, and warmth in small interactions. Across all seasons, animals provided consistency, companionship, and psychological grounding. Animals also reminded humans of vulnerability and care. Observing a young kitten, a stray pup, or a bird with injured wings encouraged subtle nurturing responses. This fostered empathy, attentional care, and gentle engagement with the world. The psychological effect was profound. By caring without expectation, observing without judgment, and interacting without pressure, humans reinforced calm resilience, emotional balance, and mindful presence. Even the smallest details were meaningful. The texture of a dog's fur under fingers, the subtle shift of a cat's tail, or the fleeting shadow of wings on stone offered a tactile, visual, and emotional anchor. Each sensory observation reinforced presence, attentional steadiness, and quiet reflection. Repeated daily, these experiences shaped habits of calm engagement, patience, and attentional focus, subtly weaving psychological resilience into the fabric of life. Finally, as day shifted into night, animals settled amongst humans, marking the transition from activity to rest. Dogs curled in corners, cats found warm ledges, and birds quieted in nests. Their steady presence provided comfort, signaling the end of the day and the beginning of calm reflection. The psychology of this quiet companionship was subtle but enduring. Awareness of continuity, reassurance in observation, and calm in presence. Life unfolded gently around these animals, allowing humans to experience mindfulness, emotional steadiness, and the quiet rhythm of existence. Through months and years, the watchfulness of animals became a slow teacher. Observing, interacting, and sharing space cultivated attention, patience, and calm endurance. The subtle lessons attentional focus, emotional regulation, awareness of rhythm, and appreciation for simplicity were absorbed without urgency or effort. Animals were companions in a psychological landscape, offering reassurance, rhythm, and gentle guidance for mind and heart alike. In chapels, cloisters, and small rooms, candles flickered softly against stone walls, casting gentle shifting shadows across floors and wooden pews. The scent of melted wax mingled with cool air, drifting from open windows, carrying hints of gardens or courtyards outside. Words were murmured, never shouted, rising gently like smoke toward vaulted ceilings. Each breath, each whispered syllable, became a quiet marker of presence, a ritualized rhythm that grounded mind and body. Prayer, in this sense, was not a quest for miracles or dramatis intervention, but a calm, steadying actor, gentle framework within which thoughts could settle, fears could suppopate, and minds could rest. Some came to prayer seeking solace, the uncertainty of daily life, training, waiting, labor, observation of seasons, or simple survival found a quiet counterpoint in ritualized attention, kneeling or sitting on stone floors, hands folded or resting on laps. Individuals engaged in slow, deliberate breathing, aligning heart and mind with the cadence of repetition. The psychology of this practice lay in rhythm, a steady beat of inhalation and exhalation, words repeated softly, gestures made with gentle deliberation. Within this rhythm, attention found anchor points, focus deepened, and emotional turbulence softened. Candles offered both light and guidance. Wax warmed slightly under fingers. Small flames danced in gentle patterns, and shadows on stone walls shifted imperceptibly. Watching the movement of fire provided soft visual focus, encouraging attentional steadiness and calming reflection. The subtle warmth of a candle's glow, the faint scent of smoke, and the low hum of murmured words intertwined to create an atmosphere of peace. Prayer in this environment became a sensory and psychological sanctuary, a space where awareness, reflection, and emotional balance could converge gently. Even the structure of prayer was calming. Movements were deliberate, whether kneeling, bowing, or crossing oneself. Hands touched smooth wood, cool stone, or fabric with deliberate attention. Repetition of phrases, psalms, or invocations offered predictability and reinforcement of attentional focus. The psychology of ritual here was subtle but profound, predictable. Repetition reinforced calm endurance, bodily awareness, and reflective engagement with both internal and external environment. Choral echoes or communal murmurs amplified this gentle influence. The soft blending of voices, rising and falling across stone walls, created a background rhythm that encouraged shared attentional engagement. Even in silence, the presence of others contributed a subtle sense of cohesion and stability. Observers could feel anchored in collective experience, drawing comfort from shared presence, rhythm, and ritualized patterns of breath and attention. Prayer also offered subtle temporal markers. Morning, midday, and evening rituals aligned the day with quiet reflection, providing gentle transitions between activity and rest. The psychology of temporal anchoring reinforced stability, attentional structure, and emotional regulation. Repetition of these patterns over days, months, and years strengthened habits of mindfulness, patience, and reflective endurance, embedding psychological resilience within daily life. The architecture of chapels and cloisters further supported calm reflection. Stone walls, wooden benches, and vaulted ceilings created acoustic and tactile environments conducive to attentional focus. Fingers traced smooth edges, eyes followed arches and light shafts, and the body adjusted naturally to the proportions of space. Environmental cues subtly guided attention and emotional regulation. Awareness of symmetry, rhythm of light and shadow, and temperature of stone surfaces reinforcing fitness and quiet endurance. Even minimal movement during prayer contributed to psychological benefits. Adjusting position, folding hands, or rising slowly encouraged subtle body awareness, aligned posture, and reinforced calm attentional engagement. Each gesture, repeated regularly, created a sense of continuity, predictability, and psychological safety. Through these small, deliberate actions, practitioners cultivated subtle self-regulation, attentional stability, and mindful awareness. Ultimately, the quiet of prayer created a space where the mind could rest, reflect, and prepare for the demands of daily life. Within stone walls, under candlelight, and alongside fellow practitioners, individuals absorbed lessons of patience, attentional control, and immutable steadiness. The psychology of prayer was gentle yet enduring, a rhythm of presence, repetition, and mindful engagement that carried beyond sacred spaces into daily routines, courtyards, training yards, and communal life. In chapels, cloisters, and small stone chambers, candlelight danced softly across walls, casting gentle shadows that stretched and shifted as flames flickered. The air was cool, tinged with the faint scent of melted wax, damp stone, and occasionally incense. Light spilled through narrow windows, painting streaks of gold and amber across wooden pews, flagstone floors, and the faces of those who had come to pray. Words were murmured quietly, rising like smoke toward the vaulted ceilings, and each syllable was an echo of steady breathing. In these spaces, prayer was not about performance or show. It was an intimate, private rhythm that invited calm, reflection, and a gentle settling of the mind. The hush that filled the rooms encouraged introspection, allowing thoughts to slow, fears to soften, and the heart to find its steady pulse. For some, prayer was a habitual anchor, a repetition of gestures and words practiced over years, kneeling, folding hands, bowing heads, and rising slowly. A choreography of calm, a routine that carried the mind through the day's uncertainties. Even the simplest phrases, repeated softly, offered reassurance and structure. The psychology of such repetition lay not in expectation, but in steadiness. The body and mind learned to find comfort in rhythm, in predictability, and in the act of dedicating attention to a single, simple practice. Each gesture and murmured phrase became a gentle meditation, allowing awareness to focus without the distractions of the outside world. The architecture of sacred spaces contributed silently to this sense of calm. Stone walls were cool and grounding. Under fingertips, lilacs and high ceilings invited the eyes to follow lines of symmetry and light. Wooden pews and benches, worn smooth by countless hands and knees, offered tactile comfort and familiar positioning. Even the floors, whether in even flagstone or worn tiles, provided a steady foundation beneath feet. These details, small and easy, encouraged presence and awareness, allowing individuals to inhabit the moment fully, without distraction. Each element of the space seemed designed to slow the mind, guide attention, and support reflection. Candles, small and numerous, provided both illumination and psychological reassurance. Their soft wavering light created moving patterns of shadow and color, offering visual focus while soothing the senses. Wax warmed slightly under fingertips, and the gentle aroma of burning wick mingled with the scent of stone and watching flames dance became a meditative exercise in attention. Noticing each flicker, each movement, and each small variation, the mind learned to stay in the present. In quiet prayer, sensory focus became a tool for grounding thought, and regulating the subtle currents of emotion. Silence accompanied and enriched prayer, allowing thoughts to settle and emotions to become more manageable. The absence of loud voices or sudden movement created a spaciousness in which individuals could breathe deeply and slowly. In this quiet, minor worries faded or were softened, and the mind learned endurance through stillness. The psychology of silence in these contexts was profound. It trained attention, reduced internal agitation, and provided a safe container for reflection. The hush of stone chambers, punctuated only by occasional creaks or the faint scratching of a quill, supported emotional regulation and fostered a meditative awareness that extended beyond the walls themselves. Prayer also offered temporal structure to the day. Morning, midday, and evening rituals provided rhythm and order, dividing the hours into gentle, predictable segments. Kneeling at first light or bowing heads as twilight approached became cues to slow down, breathe, and center attention. Through repetition, rituals embedded attentional habits and emotional regulation within daily life. The predictability of these reinforced calm endurance, allowing the mind to anticipate and prepare for quiet reflection. Even for those who were not devout, these routines offered psychological benefits, structure, rhythm, and the general reassurance that some things remained constant in an ever-changing world. The act of prayer involved not only words but also movement. Rising from a kneeling position, folding hands across the chest, or gently touching stone or wood became subtle exercises in body awareness. Each movement was performed deliberately, methodically, training the mind to coordinate with the body in a calm and attentive manner. The repetition of gestures, over days, months, and years, created a slow, grounding rhythm. In this rhythm, individuals cultivated focus, patience, and awareness of physical and mental states alike. Attention became a skill honed quietly, supported by the gentle predictability of movement and the soft rhythm of breath. Communal prayer added a subtle, shared layer of psychological support. Even when words were whispered or chanted softly, the presence of others contributed to a sense of shared purpose and calm. Murmured responses, synchronized gestures, and the soft cadence of collective breath provided continuity and reassurance. The quiet synchronization of people in ritual practice created a gentle harmony that reinforced attentional steadiness, emotional regulation, and connectedness. Individuals could feel the presence of others without judgment, contributing to feelings of safety and shared stability. Seasons and light influenced the experience of prayer, offering dynamic cues to the mind. Morning sun filtering through stained glass, the soft glow of candles against dusk, or the cool dimness of overcast afternoons all contributed to the sensory atmosphere. These variations encouraged subtle attentionologists and mindfulness. Observers learned to notice slight changes in temperature, light, and sound, and to respond with calm awareness. The psychology of environmental sensitivity was intertwined with ritual practice. Noticing and adjusting to cues strengthened attentional focus and cultivated an inner steadiness that persisted in the sacred space. Prayer also offered an opportunity to release internal tension. Breath became slow and deliberate, thoughts settled, and worries could be acknowledged and let go gently. In moments of stillness, individuals experienced relief from anticipatory stress, from the weight of duties, and from uncertainties of daily life. The psychology of prayer, in this sense, was restorative. It allowed for emotional decompression and mental clarity. Repeated over time, this quiet practice nurtured resilience, patience, and subtle emotional intelligence, teaching that calm could be cultivated through attention, presence, and gentle, habitual action. Even small details, the folding of hands, the positioning of feet, the tracing of candle edges became anchors for mindfulness. These gestures grounded the mind in the present, encouraging reflection and observation without pressure or expectation. The psychology embedded in these simple actions was quiet but durable. Attentional control, emotional regulation, and contemplative awareness were strengthened incrementally over hours, days, and years. Individuals learned that calm could be fostered, not only in moments of crisis, but also in the gentle repetition of ordinary actions. Over time, prayer spaces themselves accumulated layers of memory and presence. Worn pews, smoothed stone, and faded inscriptions reflected centuries of human engagement, quiet persistence, and habitual reflection. Awareness of these traces deepened the sense of continuity and stability. The psychology of inhabiting a space with such history was one of humility and calm endurance, an understanding that one was part of a long continuum, and that simple, repeated actions contributed to the gentle rhythm of human experience. In conclusion, the quiet of prayer was a multidimensional practice. It encompassed attention, breath, gesture, sensory awareness, rhythm, and reflection. It created a sanctuary for both mind and body, offering rest, insight, and calm. Through repetition, environmental engagement, communal presence, and ritualizaments, individuals cultivated subtle psychological strengths, patience, mindfulness, emotional regulation, and reflective awareness. Prayer, therefore, was not only a spiritual act, but also a profound exercise in remembrance, supporting the mind, heart, and body in ways both gentle and lasting. Life, even in its simplest forms, leaves traces, footsteps pressed into dusty streets, the impressions of worn sandals in soft earth, and the quiet rhythm of daily routines all tell a story. In medieval towns, across training yards, courtyards, and markets, these traces were subtle but enduring. Dust would settle, rains would erase marks, yet the repeated patterns of living, the slow passage of feet, the folding of cloaks, the gentle brushing off hands over stone were remembered in small ways. These physical imprints were accompanied by intangibly traces, the laughter shared in quiet moments, murmured prayers in candlelit chapels, and the soft exchanges of greetings between neighbors. Memory, in this sense, was not only personal but collective, built in layers across streets, homes, and lives. The psychology of memory emphasizes gentleness and persistence, even in lives marked by discipline, endurance, or hardship. What often remains is not the dramatic, but the quiet, the patience of practice, the soft focus of attention, the repetitive gestures repeated day after day. Every footstep across a sun-warmed stone path, every careful tying of sandals, and every absorbed moment of observation contributed to a life that was quietly meaningful. Memory preserves these small acts, turning them into a legacy of calm endurance and human presence. Even lives touched by harsh routines or rigorous contests left a gentle imprint in the hearts of those who witnessed them and in the spaces they inhabited. The environment itself became a witness. Stone walls, wooden posts, worn benches, and flagstone streets absorbed countless repetitions of human activity. A low stone wall in a courtyard might bear the faint groove of elbows rested upon it, while the flagstones could hold subtle impressions from countless shoes, sandals, and bare feet. Even when rain was sheeted away or seasons shifted, the memory, embedded in the tactile landscape, persisted, waiting to be noticed by those who passed later. The psychology of place and memory is intertwined. Our surroundings retain echoes of movement, gesture, and presence, and awareness of these traces fosters reflection, patience, and quiet appreciation of continuity. Storytelling preserved memory across generations. Tales whispered in candlelight, recounted in courtyards, or shared at hearths captured more than events. They captured the essence of lives lived. Names were often remembered alongside small actions, the way someone repaired a worn sandal, prepared a simple meal, or folded a cloak with care. These narratives did not glorify heroism in the dramatic sense but honored the rhythm, persistence, and attentiveness of daily life. In telling stories, communities create psychological scaffolding for memory, allowing acts of ordinary endurance to be valued and embedding lessons of calm, reflective living into the fabric of cultural life. Even objects carried memory. Sandals worn smooth, tunics patched repeatedly, leather straps darkened with oil, wooden tools polished from repeated use. These were more than functional items. They were repositories of experience, touch, and habit. Holding, repairing, or simply observing these objects invited reflection on the lives intertwined with them. Each frayed edge or faded color became a marker of persistence, patience, and daily engagement. The psychology embedded in objects often lies in their quiet testimony. They remind observers that the most enduring elements of life are often modest, repetitive, and steady, rather than loud or dramatic. Footprints in dust and soil were the most transient yet evocative traces. They recorded journeys across courtyards, through fields, or along cobbled streets. Some marks were deep, pressed by heavy weight or repeated passage, while others were light, fleeting impressions held by soft earth. Over time, weather softened and erased many traces, yet in their moment of existence, these footprints served as markers of presence, movement, and engagement. Observing footprints yesterday's, last week's, or last season's, and encouraged reflection on continuity and impermanence. The psychology of transient traces emphasized attentiveness, awareness of passage, and acceptance of impermanence, cultivating mindfulness and calm observation. Memory also lives in rhythm. The repetition of daily routines, practicing skills, performing rituals, tending to animals reinforced patterns of calm endurance. Even when circumstances were demanding, adherence to habitual rhythms provided psychological stability. Repetition itself became an anchor, shaping attentional focus, emotional regulation, and the capacity to inhabit the present fully. Memories of these rhythms, carried forward by those who observed or participated, reinforce the values of patience, careful attention, and steady engagement with the world. In this way, repetition was both functional and reflective, serving the body and the mind simultaneously. Community reinforced memory as well. Shared spaces, shared tasks, and shared rituals created overlapping layers of recollection. A bench where several generations rested, a courtyard where multiple individuals practiced movements, or a chapel where voices rose in whispered chantal, became loci of collective memory. Witnessing and participating in these shared experiences strengthened psychological bonds, creating a sense of continuity and belonging. Memory was thus both individual and social, and the traces left by one life could inform, guide, and comfort others across time. Stories of endurance and quiet presence persisted even after the most structured contests or disciplined routines ended. Individuals may have participated in competitions or rigorous training, yet the lasting impression was rarely the fleeting excitement of contests. Instead, what endured were the softer aspects: the morning sun warming stone floors, the careful tying of sandals, the attentive observation of weather or tool, and the quiet attention to posture and breath. These subtle, steady actions became embedded in memory, teaching observers, whether peers, students, or later generations, that calm, consistent effort leaves enduring influence. The landscape of memory extended beyond physical traces. Smells of hearths, the soft echo of footsteps, and the file of sun-warmed stone or wooden surfaces contributed to a multi-sensory preservation of life. The psychology of sensory memory is profound. Scent, touch, and sound trigger reflection, attention, and emotional recall, even when direct observation is impossible. These subtle cues sustain connection with the past. Memories of ordinary life, anchored in the senses, offer gentle reassurance that continuity exists, that human presence is enduring, and that ordinary actions are meaningful. As centuries pass, tangible traces often fade. Buildings crumble, objects decay, and soil reclaims footprints. Yet memory persists in stories, objects, rituals, and habits. Observing the continuity of life in subtle acts fosters calm reflection and reinforces the value of everyday endurance. Psychological resilience is strengthened through recognition of these enduring patterns. The mind learns to notice small, repeated gestures, to appreciate quiet continuity, and to understand that influence is measured, not in drama but in persistence. Even simple gestures, repeated over a lifetime, accumulate significance. Folding cloaks, tending to personal tools, performing rituals, or carefully navigating stone streets all carry subtle psychological weight. Each act strengthens attentional focus, patience, and reflection. In memory, these small gestures are amplified, becoming markers of character, presence, and steady endurance. The psychology in everyday life thus becomes both personal and communal, a source of calm reflection for those living it and those remembering it. Ultimately, the traces we leave footprints, gestures, tools, routines form a quiet legacy. They remind us that the measure of life is not always in spectacle or drama, but in the steady rhythm of daily actions, the persistence of attention, and the gentle endurance of ordinary living. Memory captures this rhythm, preserving it for those who follow, teaching that presence, care, and steady engagement leave lasting impressions. Even harsh or difficult lives are softened in this reflection, remembered not for suffering but for resilience, patience, and quiet diligence. Thus, the footsteps of medieval fighters, artisans, and townsfolk continue into memory. Each day's effort, each small act of care, each repetition of practice or prayer leaves a subtle imprint. These imprints, though often invisible, accumulate into a landscape of calm endurance, attentive presence, and reflective continuity. Memory, in preserving these traces, teaches that history is not only in grand deeds, but in small, consistent acts of life, lived fully and attentively, even when the structures of towns, training yards, and chapels fade, and when objects decay or crumble. The influence of these lives persists, in stories told by survivors, in lessons passed down through practice, and in the quiet reflections of those observing the past. The psychology of memory demonstrates its gentleness. It values persistence, attention, and continuity of memory preserves calm endurance as much as it preserves feats, reminding us that ordinary acts, repeated over time, are quietly heroic in their constancy. Footsteps into memory remind us that human influence is cumulative, subtle, and enduring. Each life, though bound by daily routines, environmental shifts, and the inevitable passage of time, contributes to a shared human narrative. Observing, participating, and reflecting on these traces cultivates patience, mindfulness, and gentle attentiveness. The psychology of memory is thus a teacher of endurance, resilience, and calm reflection. Even the smallest gestures, the tying of a sandal, the gentle sweeping of a courtyard, the quiet practice of ritual become threads woven into the fabric of history, sustaining presence beyond immediate perception. In reflecting on these quiet traces, one realizes that memory is an act of care. It preserves the ordinary, honors steady effort, and acknowledges the persistence of life's rhythm. Footsteps, words, tools, and gestures all contribute to this psychological landscape. By attending to the imprints, by noticing and valuing them, we cultivate empathy, patience, and mindful presence. Memory, then, is not a passive record. It is an active participant in shaping calm awareness and enduring reflection. Even in observation, the traces of medieval life objects, architecture, stories teach subtle lessons. Observers notice the worn stones, the frayed leather, and the careful repetition of tasks. These observations foster psychological attunement, awareness of detail, patience with process, and reverence for persistence. Memory, through these channels, carries calm endurance forward across centuries. The past, quiet and unassuming, becomes a teacher of reflective engagement, gentle attention, and continuity of human effort. Footsteps in Tomomori are therefore more than marks on earth. They are reflections of life's rhythm, persistence, and continuity. They invite us to slow down, notice, and appreciate the enduring value of ordinary acts. Every small, repeated gesture contributes to this legacy, teaching us that history's embrace is gentle, that resilience is quiet, and that life's impact is often most profound in its steadiness rather than spectacle. Memory, in preserving this, offers reassurance. Lives lived attentively, calmly, and steadily leave a lasting, meaningful trace. As we bring this journey to a close, it is worth pausing to reflect on the gentle rhythms that define the lives we have visited. Beyond the clang of swords, beyond the imagined roar of spectators, there existed a world measured not in drama, but in steady, deliberate acts. Every morning, a courtyard bathed in soft light. Every meal shod quietly among companions. Every footstep pressed into stone or dust. These were the subtle markers of existence, the invisible scaffolding of life. The psychology of medieval fighters, and indeed of all who move it through these days, was shaped as much by routine, patience, and careful attention as by any moment of contest. On remembering them, we discover that endurance is not only about strength, but about rhythm, presence, and mindful persistence. Life, as we have seen, was structured by quiet repetition. Meals offered fuel, but also ritual. Clothing, plain as it was, spoke of humility and practicality. Tools, worn smooth by hands over time, carried the memory of labor and care. Even silence and stillness were teachers. The courtyards, the chapels, and the training yards, all spaces of post-stored lessons in attention and emotional regulation. Men and women who inhabited these spaces learned to carry themselves with steadiness, to breathe deliberately, and to cultivate patience. In their simple gestures, the tying of a sandal, the folding of a cloak, the measured step across stone, they built habits of calm endurance that transcended any immediate task. The psychology of everyday life, in these accounts, is profound. Human beings learn not only from grand events, but from the repeated, seemingly ordinary interactions with the world. A hand resting on cool stone, a gentle murmur of prayer, or the shared laughter of companions at the edge of a courtyard, all contributed to emotional resilience and even the smallest acts, repeated day after day, created continuity and meaning. In reflecting on these lives, we recognize that endurance is cultivated quietly, patiently, and often invisibly. Far from spectacle and fanfare, memory plays a crucial role in this continuity. Footprints in dust, frayed sandals, worn tools, and whispered stories are all carriers of lived experience. They remind us that history is not only composed of dramatic moments, but of the steady rhythms of ordinary life. These traces, whether physical or intangible, offer guidance and reassurance. They illustrate that resilience is an accumulation of small acts, that attention and care over time produce influence as enduring as monuments or battlefields. To remember is to honor persistence, patience, and quiet engagement with the world. Communal life, too, offered structure and psychological support. Training yards, markets, chapels, and courtyards were shared spaces where people observed one another, exchanged knowledge, and participated in common rhythms. The presence of others, quiet, attentive, and steady, reinforced individual habits of patience and reflection. In these shared experiences, lessons were transmitted not only through instruction, but through example, repetition, and observation. Human endurance, it seems, is nurtured as much in community as in solitude. The environment itself, stone walls, wooden beams, sun-warmed paths, and candlelit chambers, acted as a subtle teacher. Its textures, temperatures, and patterns provided sensory cues that guided attention, supported presence, and fostered calm. Observing a familiar courtyard in the morning light, noting the way shadows shift across a stone floor, or tracing the worn edges of a tool or bench encouraged mindfulness. In this way, Even the inanimate world participated in the cultivation. Afcom, attentive endurance, ritual and habit were essential. Simple, repeated gestures, prayer, preparation, training, meals anchored the mind and offered predictability. In the midst of uncertainty, these small rituals created psychological steadiness, helping individuals regulate emotion, attention, and physical coordination. Therapetition itself became a quiet meditation, a way of embedding focus and reflection into daily life. Through these routines, ordinary acts acquired significance, building continuity that extended into memory, community, and culture. The passage of time and the seasons further shaped perception and endurance. Awareness of natural cycles, the sun rising and setting, frost on rooftops, rain-soaking earth, and the gentle shift of light through windows provided subtle markers for reflection and rhythm. These cues helped structure attention, cultivate a patience, and connect human life to the broader, enduring cycles of nature. In living with the seasons, people learned acceptance, adaptability, and calm responsiveness, lessons as valuable psychologically as any formal inspiration. Even humor and shared stories played a role in sustaining calm endurance. At the end of a long day, men and women would gather quietly, recounting memories of home, family, or simple events. Laughter was soft and unhurried, more like a gentle exhale than an eruption of sound. These moments reinforced social bonds, normalized struggle, and reminded individuals that life extended beyond tasks, contests, or strict discipline. Memory and storytelling intertwined with observation and habit to create a psychological safety net, supporting reason through continuity and shared experience. Looking back, we see that these lives were marked by balance. Strength was cultivated not only through physical exertion, but through mental and emotional patience, attentional focus, ritual, sensory awareness, and communal presence all combined to support enduring performance. Whether in practice, work, or everyday interaction, the seemingly mundane, the tying off shoes, the careful step across stone, the measured breath before prayer was in fact the substrate of calm endurance, shaping mind and body alike. Finally, reflection teaches us that the legacy of these lives is subtle but enduring. Objects, spaces, gestures, and stories persist as quiet witnesses to human presence. Footprints in dust may fade, stones may weather, and wooden tools may rot, but the habits, lessons, and rhythms cultivated enduring memory and influence. They remind us that resilience is not always dramatic, that psychological strength grows from repeated small acts, and that ordinary human lives carry value precisely through their quiet assistance. History, therefore, embraces both the grand and the humble, the spectacular and the mundane. But it is often in the latter that we find lasting lessons of endurance, attentional focus, and gentle psychological. In conclusion, the psychology of medieval fighters, workers, and townsfolk alike was shaped as much by quiet repetition, attention to daily life, and shared routines as by moments of competition or challenge. Life-steady rhythms, the folding of a cloak, the careful tying of a sandal, the soft murmur of prero ferido Portuguese for reflection, presence, and calm resilience. Memory preserved these acts, teaching subsequent generations the value of persistence and the gentle power of ordinary endurance. As we step away from this exploration, let us carry forward the quiet lesson of history, that the small, repeated gestures of care, attentiveness, and patience are as enduring, as meaningful, and as profound as the grandest of deeds.